Oh, we're live. I kind of miss
We are live
I miss the like tune we used to do.
at the
That like
beginning.
like the cartoon thing with the
Oh yeah,
rock and roll
the
guitar.
countdown, the 5-minute
Yeah,
countdown.
I kind of dug the
We
countdown. I
can
don't
bring
know.
it back.
Can we? I mean, I thought it was like Nick's for some reason.
Oh,
But
I don't know. That's above
guys,
my pay grade.
me too. I'm Ron Placone though, and Tina, what's up, Tina? How are
Hey,
you?
I'm Tina-Desiree Berg. I am on the road right now, folks. So I'm calling in from my room here in Las Vegas. I'm here covering the CES show, the big tech show.
I thought because you're in your official pink resistance hat, you are at the launch of Hillary 2024. That's not what you're up to? I
No,
thought you were still with herring.
no,
I have some
no.
chatters for
I'm
you that
not
I'm
channeling
making.
my inner wine mom. No, definitely not. I am wearing a hat because it's been monsooning raining out here, and I was up at 5 a.m. out in the rain, then in the hotel, then back out in the rain in the hotel. So the hat's staying on. I have really insane rain hat hair going on underneath there,
What
no doubt.
what kind of event starts at 5 a.m.? What were they doing at 5 a.m.? Who has anything interesting to say at 5 a.m.?
No one.
All right, so what were they doing? Why were you awake then?
I had to get up to prep and get some stuff done, and then I had to cover something at 8 a.m. So
Oh,
there's a
jeez.
whole background thing here.
All right. That's quite a schedule. Well, thanks for being here. Welcome to Status Coup, everybody. Tina's in Vegas. I'm in Los Angeles, so we're still in the same time zone. And
We are still in the same
Tina
time
is
zone.
is covering Hillary 24, and I'm.
Do you see any cat ears on the top of my pink beret?
I'm making them for you. I'm gonna sew them as soon as the show's over.
So wrong. It's so wrong.
What are you at for real? Actually, give us a brief explanation of where you are.
In the room?
The event.
Oh,
I'm sure
CES.
your
I'm like,
hotel room is very nice.
my Airbnb or my dog's with me here. So CES is the Consumer Electronics Show. That's the biggest, largest tech show out there. But they've expanded in the last few years. They also cover a lot of content creation now because it relates back to tech. A lot of the hardware and software that's developed, their main target is content creators, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Things like Spotify and whatnot. So it's really an all-encompassing event. Today I was in the marketing area, so I can tell you brand safety is a big hot topic this year at CES for the obvious reasons. A lot of these guys, they want to work with social media sites and whatnot, and it becomes a dangerous space to be in when you've got Andrew Tate and Andrew Anglin being reinstated. That's my dog Hypatia agrees with me. Yeah, she's right.
She's like, I've had enough. I can't do any more brand safety talk today. I've just had enough.
She was cooped up by herself.
It's important. Yeah, she wants to.
So yeah, she's like, "Mommy, you're back, and now I want to play." I'm like, "No, Mommy can't play yet."
So smash that like button, everybody. We got a lot of stories for you today. We'll get right to them. Tina is coming at us from the road. But so landlords are using spy tech to spy on people. We're going to be talking about that. We're also going to be covering the storm in South Dakota. Hopefully we're going to have a guest here. But as you can imagine, we are going to be a bit we are going to be a bit at the mercy of what he may or may not be able to do because
I'm worried that
storm.
He's in a storm in North Dakota, so I'm worried that he might, or South Dakota. He might not have internet. Yeah.
He might not have internet. So in South Dakota, there have been very, very significant storms. The weather's been crazy all over the freaking country, by the way. I mean, it's been, it was a ton of rain and sleet and hail and snow and like really bad snowstorms all over the place. In California, it was like super nice. Now, California's been raining for days on end, which is kind of unusual here. Northern California's been flooding.
Yeah.
And the rest of the country's having a heat wave pretty much or close to a heat wave. And then South Dakota is covered in snow, 12
foot high. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Oh, wait, we have him. I see him in the
green room.
He's in the green room. This is very exciting.
They are running out of supplies right now.
Yep.
So it's a very serious situation barely
very
anybody
serious.
is covering this. ABC did one segment on it, just mentioning, hey, these folks in South Dakota, they are literally running out of supplies on reservations and so forth. So we are hopefully going to be bringing Warren Guss Yellowhair in here shortly.
It looks like they're testing his audio.
So he is to give you guys he is the Men's Lifeways coordinator. He is part of the Oglala Sioux tribe at the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. And as soon as we know that his tech is okay to go, which again, we got to be a little patient here, folks, because we're doing this live, and he is in South Dakota where they have a lot of crazy weather going on. 12 feet of snow.
12 feet. That's what it says.
Which, if you don't have anywhere to be, that can be a lot of fun, but it can also be really freaking dangerous. That is not a snow drift to mess around with.
Especially if you lose power. And then if your heat is being provided by a fireplace, you can't get wood. I mean, there's so many add-on problems that can crop up. Luckily, no one has died, which is remarkable, honestly, given the circumstances. That's good news. Oh, yes, there we are. Hi, Warren.
Hello.
Hi, Warren. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, it's Guss Yellowhair.
Just Yellowhair?
Okay, all right.
Guss, G-U-S.
Guss Yellowhair. Okay.
Guss
Welcome, Guss Yellowhair. So give us a little bit of background about what's happening right now. People are snowed in. Snowplows can't get in. Think food's running out.
Definitely is. It was a bad situation. It still is. And actually, our tribal president had to declare a state of emergency to try to get the National Guard to come out and help remove some of the snow. During the right in the middle of the storm, of course, here in my community, we were without electricity for about 18 hours. And for the homes that were run by electricity, of course, they the ones they had patients that were on machines and things like that. I mean, they were just hanging on, for dear life. And I heard you talk about no loss of life, but actually there was a young boy that lost his life. He was 12 years old, and that was to the east of us. There's another reservation called the Rosebud. They're still part of our tribe. However, a young boy had lost his life, and it wasn't because of the cold. It was because they couldn't get to him. With the plows and such, it was so cold that it was. Actually, I think the coldest that it got was negative 44.
Holy moly!
Exactly. And so, just really lucky that there was no more loss of life. Than it's unfortunate for the young boy. But yeah, it was just a very scary and deadly times. With that weather, that intense cold, and just kind of caught people unaware. And especially with the electricity being off for like 18 hours, you can imagine that, like sitting in a deep freeze or something, for that, and unable to move around because that snow was just, coming down. It was just really, it was just such a scary moment, or scary time, that, And so, right now the plows are still out there digging the people that are living out in the country. The country folks here where I live, it's in a small village, and so we were cleared out, but the drifts are still going down some, but they were like 10 to 12 feet in some places, just making it really hard. And of course, towards the end of the month, I don't know if you're familiar with the Indian reservation here on the plains or in South Dakota, but we're considered one of the poorest counties in the entire United States. And so you can imagine, add that to that situation, and there was people were running out of propane, and there was actually a shortage in wood, firewood, to the ones that their only source of heat is firewood. And so it was just extreme. I mean, now it's starting to warm up a little bit, and it's starting to melt off, which is making the clearing the roads a lot more, a little bit easier, So, but again, just in the last couple of days, we had another storm that dropped about 12 inches of snow.
Wow!
And add that to what we already got. So it was like I said, it was really scary. and just put people so bad that our president had to declare that state of emergency. So yeah, definitely.
How is the supply situation right now? Like, is there any potential shortages on food or medicine, or are you guys pretty okay right now? Or
because of that state of emergency, then people have been bringing in food, and it's available to the people that the roads are cleared out, but unfortunately, you still have to get it out to the people living out in districts. And we've had people mobilize here and using sleds and to pack it over the snow and get it to them, like that. So yeah, there's still some hardships, but like I said, people mobilized and working together to try to get us through this this tragedy. It was a tragedy. Yeah,
it is a tragedy. To give folks an idea, how much worse is this than your normal typical winter, temperature wise, snow wise?
Well, actually, we've been in a drought for the last several years, and that goes for snowfall as well. And so, like I said, people were just caught unexpectedly, just unaware when that snow hit. Of course, the weatherman did, give some a little bit of head time leadway for people to prepare, but it was towards the end of the month. People live here on a fixed income, which is a monthly income, and yeah, it just took people by complete surprise. So yeah. So that's the way it is. That's typically the way life is here on the Pine Ridge.
More extremes. I also feel like with climate change, though, coming from a drought to negative 44 degree weather with 12-foot, snowdrifts, that's one extreme to a next. I feel like climate change is playing a role here.
It is. People are, surprisingly, it is, during that time, the propane trucks were actually breaking down. That it was so cold that the diesel was gelling up as far as what they call it. So it was just
that's crazy.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. So again, people are trying to get prepared now that that the roads are being opened, and we're just right at the beginning of winter here, so we'll see what's yet to come. So I appreciate you guys taking time to get the story out and interview and do all that. So there's definitely some more help that's needed. We always say not a helping hand, but a hand up. We just need the tools and stuff like that. We can help ourselves. But again, you're talking about an area that's considered one of the poorest counties in the nation. Like a third world status. So there's all those challenges that have to be met head on, and and just really thankful for the the friends that have reached out and lend a helping hand and doing what they can. So that mobilization of that help has been really appreciated here. Very much.
Where can people go to learn more or to make a contribution? Is there anything available online for folks to go to, like a
there
website?
is. Okay. Yeah, there actually is. There's several groups, but the one that we've been working with here in my community is called One Spirit.
One Spirit,
right?
.org, and they help out with propane and firewood, clothing and food. They have those. They have the equipment, to do that, and so they're a nonprofit org. And so if somebody wanted to make a donation, they can also get a tax write-off from that. So yeah, so that's one of the organizations that people can go to.
And what was that URL one more time?
One Spirit, or www.onespirit.com or .org.
Onespirit.org. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We'll make sure we get it in the comments and in the description.
So people can. So I wanted to ask you. I did find this story about the 12-year-old from Rosebud Sioux Tribe who passed because he didn't receive medical treatment. This is a preventable. It should be considered a preventable death, right? I mean, is there what can be done for the future? Because I feel like more extreme weather patterns are coming at us, and we have to sort of account for that. And what should we all be doing to prep for this sort of thing so that this doesn't happen again? Do you have thoughts on that?
Well, I think that just being more prepared for those type of health issues, I think, and I don't know how much more prepared you can be than maybe like generators for people that are on equipment, maybe generators that people can share, because we live in like housing areas, like cluster housing. So if people could, somehow raise the money to maybe purchase that, like these generators where several families can plug in, the ones that need life support equipment, because of those health conditions. Yeah. So I think just things like that, or even just solar powered generators that that I've seen advertised on different places, and things like that. But like I said, if people could help out with that, that'd be great. That just because of the intense poverty conditions here that we also have to deal with, if people don't have that extra money to go out and purchase that. So, yeah. There's things like that.
Yeah, that's the bigger issue, isn't it? Is addressing some of the poverty just across the board. That needs to happen, but it just never seems to happen in this country. Also, there's part of the story they're talking about an elderly woman was forced to walk 8 miles in the cold since no one could reach her to be rescued. Do you know this individual? Anything about that story? That's insane.
Well, yeah,
8 miles. 8 miles.
That's quite especially in the winter conditions. But the place is like very rural here on the Pine Ridge Reservation, where the home of the Oglala Lakota people is approximately 100 miles long, 50 miles wide. So, there is hardships everywhere. But like I said, people try to meet these challenges head on. Traditionally, our people were very industrious people, working together, to try to overcome some of these hardships. So, I saw a lot of that and witnessed a lot of that, just people going out and just, being that good relative and reaching out and trying to help where they can. So I think, people are doing quite a bit of that and sharing what they got. I know some people had, with their food and, their resources like that, they went above and beyond what would be asked of them. Went out of their way to just try to help as much as they could. So I saw a lot of that, witnessed a lot of that.
Guss Yellowhair, let me ask you a question. We have a lot of activists that watch our show here on Status Coup. If there was something that you could tell them about ways they can support your tribe, other than obviously making donations for you to get the proper equipment that you need, are there other things that they could be doing politically or otherwise, putting pressure on?
Oh, definitely. Sister, can you excuse me? I'm going to ask my daughter. What is that?
Yeah.
Organization, Indian Collective. Yeah, there's an organization called Indian Collective, and they've been really, at the forefront of taking up some of these political injustices, land issues, treaty issues, and things like that. One of the things that people could do, they're listening to this broadcast, is that my daughter and I are owners of Tatanka Res Tours, which is a reservation-based tourism business. And we've been doing that for several years. And when people come out and visit, then we actually share, some of the hardships that we're going through, the murder and missing Indigenous women, just different issues that, that we're able to share with the people. So to support that, that would be great. So yeah. And
is that a separate website for that, or is it all together on the one we're going to share in the group?
Well, they can look at what's the easiest way to get that, sister. Tatanka Res Tours. It's TATANKAREZ and then tours, TOURZ. We have a Facebook, and they can go to the Facebook and access that too. And we'd be more than willing to share more, where people can do that, because I know it's very difficult to do that when you're doing an interview. They have all that written down.
You mentioned the missing Indigenous women. I mean, this to me should be a really huge story because it's happening in multiple places. Is that been a big problem in your area too?
It has been actually, and not only here on the Pine Ridge and here on the plains, but throughout the Western Hemisphere. There's a lot of that going on, and just now people are starting to hear about it. By just constantly saying, hey, well, this has to be addressed. And the outside, when somebody goes disappearing or missing, you get Amber Alerts, right?
Right.
And the country knows. But here, when somebody goes missing, it's either through Facebook, social media, or boots on the ground type of work. And so, yeah, I mean, there's definitely some disparities there that need to be addressed, and try to find some solutions to these problems and these injustices. So, yeah, definitely.
Ron, I feel like I'm hijacking that.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
I didn't know if you had any other. Yeah, no, thank you. I'd actually love to talk with you folks again about the missing Indigenous women part of the story, because I don't think that's getting enough attention, and that's something that we could have a half-hour conversation about, that people should really be hearing about.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, not just the women, but it's has since moved to men and children as well.
There's no documentation whatsoever, correct? Like there's no they don't record.
Well, when
missing.
Yeah, when we approach some of the policing agencies, the powers that be, they usually tell us, well, there's not enough funding, to address issues and things like that. We get pushed back to the back burner. And so, yeah, definitely we have to, have a conversation about that.
Would that be majority FBI that oversees that, or is that other agencies?
Well, in the Indian country, you're looking at the FBI, which is the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Okay.
You're looking at the U.S. Marshals.
Marshals.
Yeah. So, yeah, those are some of the agencies that have jurisdiction here on the res. But of course, even though they have jurisdictions, they don't apply their resources when it comes to that. So. Yeah, so there's a lot of difficulties, uphill battle all the way, But hey, you got to keep going, You got to keep going and do what you can, and sooner or later the message will get out there, and hopefully these will be addressed, and we'll have.
But that's why it's going to take pressure from outside forces to bring that to bear. I mean, I think if more people realize that these cases aren't getting looked at, investigated, and per capita, the amount of missing women is enormous compared to what you would see in it's completely unacceptable that this is happening. But I think if there was pressure brought to the federal government on a certain level, they would have to start addressing that.
Oh, definitely. I think, and we've been seeing that. It's slow to come to fruition, but we've been seeing that our governor has actually appointed a young lady to head that.
Okay.
So definitely some work. Because of interviews like this and other people, other organizations talking about it, our political powers that be are starting to address that, and we're starting to see more and more people take interest. So.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, but more needs to come. I mean, you just can't.
Definitely, way more needs to come, because we even had some cases here in California in the San Diego area, and when I heard about that, I was like, how is this happening? I just, it's very frustrating.
Yeah, you bet. Like I said, the only way to address it is American public opinion, to let more people know.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. They need to be afraid that the opinion's so poor that if they don't react or do something scary might happen. Like the politicians might actually lose their jobs, or et cetera, et cetera. That domino effect. Yeah. So.
You bet. Well, I've got your messaging where I contact you. You're Zaina?
No, I'm Tina, actually, Zaina, but I work with Zaina. But yeah, I mean, if you guys want to set something up, that would be awesome. I would love to have a longer conversation about this.
Okay, we'll definitely get some emails out and get connected with the right people, and they can share and open.
That's great.
Do that. Yeah.
Thank you for doing this.
Thank you. Thank you, Guss Yellowhair. Appreciate your time. Yeah.
Well, thank you for having us, and we'll
absolutely.
We'll try to find solutions.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
Stay safe out there.
Happy New Year.
Safe. Yeah. Happy New Year. Wow.
Well, there you go.
Okay, now I'm brokenhearted because I did.
In perspective, huh?
Here I was thinking that they didn't have any loss of life from that first article, and then I hear about this, and I look it up, and I'm like, sure enough, 12 years old. This is.
It's so messed up, and I didn't want to mention this because I didn't want it to. I don't know, but like I didn't know if it was okay to say, but there's actually a very, very beautiful movie that addresses the whole like there's no documentation of Indigenous women and I guess Indigenous men too now. There's no documentation of when they go missing. It's a movie called Wind River.
Okay.
And
it's based on, is it a narrative based on real, or is it a documentary?
It's not a documentary. It's a film, but
Okay.
I think it's loosely based on, you know, some actual happenings, but it's a fictional story, but it, you know, it addresses this. And then it's one of those movies where at the end they do, you know, like the whole kind of like post epilogue thing where they say there is no documentation of, and it's a really great movie. I mean, I don't know. I felt a little weird mentioning it with Guss on, like, hey, there's a great movie about this, but you know, but there is a really educational and also brilliant film about this issue that I recommend to people.
It's a very serious issue.
It's yeah. Well, I mean, it's not, the movie's not a comedy. Like it's a very it's a drama. Like it's a very good film. Like
I assume.
but yeah, so,
but I'd actually like to do a whole nother segment on that because I do not think this gets enough attention at all. And I know when I first heard about some of these stories, I was like, "You're kidding me! How is this happening at this day and age?" But here we are.
OneSpiritLakota.org, folks. Check it out. And
they could definitely use some support. So.
And if you're ever out that way, check out their tour company. I would like.
Yeah, that actually sounds really cool.
I've not been to South Dakota in a long time.
I haven't either.
But last time I was there, I actually did almost get in a car accident because of the weather. It snows there all the time. I mean, it
snows there. Yeah,
like
it's cold.
10 months a year it snows there, I think. Maybe not quite that much, but close. Like close. I mean, it's like one of those places. Like Montana, I think a buddy of mine who grew up in Montana, he was like, yeah, there was one year where we got a little bit of snow in July. And I was like, oh my God.
That's wild. In July?
Why would you know? I mean, some people, hey, people who love it, that's your place.
Hey man,
if you love snow,
my family is from a country that's like dark 24 hours a day part of the year. So I am not casting any aspersions.
No, hey, to each your own. I mean, I know people who they love winter weather and it suits them just fine. And all power
I'm
to
a bad
them.
Viking. I like California.
I do too. Yeah, I kind of But anyway, best to them and guys, please check out all that stuff and we will definitely be highlighting more of these stories. So
it's important.
Let's go to the Uber.
Landlord uses spy tech.
We'll start Uber. Let's do
Uber. Okay, Uber.
We got some videos.
This is a good story too.
So this is kind of breaking, guys, because it's happening today. We'll go to the Status Coup video to start here. So this was actually out in December. There was some Uber striking action, and we covered it here at Status Coup. John Farina was on the ground. So let's start there. Let's check out that video.
Abusing. I said it before and I'll say it again. Poverty is the worst form of violence. Poverty is the worst form of violence. Drop the lawsuit. Do it now. NYC, Drivers Unite. We demand you drop that lawsuit.
I'm a driver advocate. The mayor knows who we are. We got a petition to reform the Taxi and Limousine Commission. Many council members signed that petition, including Eric Adams, including Jumaane Williams. We keep inviting them, we text them, we email them, and they're not out here. They don't show up. Somebody's got to ask those questions. Why they're not here? We're 2 weeks away from Christmas, and look at what Uber's doing. Taxi Limousine Commission approved a minuscule raise for the drivers. And here comes Uber trying to stop it. We didn't even get 25 cents. It's around 23 cents, 24 cents. It's an additional 22 cents on the per mile and about 5 cents on the per minute. We didn't hit 25 cents. And the reason they do this, you can't blame them. They're smart. They're being proactive because this is gonna affect future raises. Understand? So it could have been a nickel that we're fighting over. Uber still would have sued, because for them it translates into millions. For us, it only translates into pennies or a few dollars. But we gave the TLC a proposal in 2020 to give drivers $2.50 a mile and 50 cents a minute. The problem with the driver in New York is that people think that we're like a Kmart job, like a $15 an hour job, a minimum wage job. No, we're small business owners. Just like the bodega, the pizza shop, the bakery, we are small business owners. The only thing that our storefront is on a set of wheels. But many people come into our storefront and we're all over the city. We're essential workers. I myself worked throughout the pandemic. Instead of doing 25 trips a day, I was doing 3 trips a day. And I still went to the hospital. Was not afraid to go to the hospital. I got COVID 2 times. And they would not do that to any other working class people. They wouldn't do it. There's just so many immigrant workers in this business and there's a language barrier. It's so easy to get over on them. It's very easy.
Do you feel like they're using and exploiting you guys?
Oh, of course. This is not boo-hoo, the poor taxi driver. Oh, boo-hoo, we need more money. No, has nothing to do with greed. This is New York City. I'll tell you what, the Seattle Uber driver is making more money right now than the New York driver, including if we get that raise.
So this goes into just what Uber has been doing. What they do is they exploit the contractor designation of their drivers, and you have situations where drivers are literally sleeping in their car when the CEO buys another multi-million-dollar home for himself.
Right.
And this also goes back to, well, let's go first to today. So today they did a straight up strike. There's a straight up Uber strike going on in New York City. Let's play that Twitter video here first.
Right. We will run the dinosaur out of the table. Have the power. That's right. And please, brother, keep that in mind. The money doesn't make us, but we make the money.
Right. That's right.
That is so correct.
Uber doesn't make the drivers. Drivers make Uber.
That's right. Say that loud. Uber do not make the drivers. Uber doesn't make the drivers. The drivers make the Uber. Uber doesn't make drivers. Drivers make Uber. Uber doesn't make drivers. Drivers make Uber. Drivers make the money.
That's right.
But money doesn't make the drivers.
That's right.
Good speech, my brother.
That's right.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.
So there you go. And there's a couple things going on here. So we know how Uber exploits people. And unfortunately, this can be traced back to a test that California failed miserably. That Tina and I have a lot of familiarity with. And that test was when a measure called Prop 22 was on the ballot here in California. Now, Prop 22, even though it was just on the ballot in California, this was a test that Uber was trying to see what they could get away with.
Right.
So here in California, there was the piece of legislation called AB 5. Now, AB 5 was not without its flaws. It needed to have the proper carve-outs that they were still figuring out. But overall, AB 5 was a good thing because what it did was it cracked down on Uber's ability to designate drivers as contractors. And it was going to force Uber to make their drivers employees, which means they would get better wages and benefits, and they would have
workers'
to be
compensation,
work and the whole 9 yards. So it was going to force Uber to do that, because the way that it worked was it basically said, if something is completely instrumental to your business, i.e., you're a car sharing platform and you need drivers, your workers need to be covered. Your workers need to be covered. You need to be employees. Now, again, are there some carve-outs that are necessary in a situation like this? Yes. Something, especially people in the creative field. Like in my world, a bunch of comedy clubs were like, well, wait a second, does that mean whenever we hire a comedian, they need to be an employee? That doesn't make any sense, because most comedians only play a certain club once a year for like 2 days. That's really bizarre.
True, but in those instances, a lot of, I would imagine, those comedians would be covered under an overarching workers' comp policy that the club has, though. I mean, what if one of those workers
Well, yeah,
does
but
get
if
harmed
you had to,
in the course of their set that night? I would imagine that they would not have a total carve out there. Not to change the subject, but
no,
do you know what I'm
I
saying?
mean, no, not really. I mean, like
If you were playing at
they had,
Flappers and you fell off the stage and you injured yourself, the way to avoid a lawsuit in essence would be to have your injuries covered under a workers' comp policy as a
sure,
worker. That's all I'm saying.
No,
I mean,
I
there's all
understand that.
these parts of the conversation that happen when, because a lot of people, I think they look at independent contractors as like, okay, so if I give them a 1099 versus a W-2,
Right.
but that's not entirely how the state of California defines that classification, right? It has nothing to do with what kind of pay you have. And in fact, on many film sets, you still have to carry workers' comp for volunteer labor. Anyway,
Okay.
I digress.
Yeah,
I just think more workers need to be covered for all of these things, and we've gotten so far down this rabbit hole where, you know, the wealthy corporate elites are taking, they don't want to pay for the workers' comp, they don't want to pay for this, they don't want to pay for that, make everybody an independent contractor, they're on their own, then we don't have to worry about it. This has created a really a class of workers out there that are, you know, very vulnerable to a great many things because they don't have any backstops. And I think we need to course correct that in some way.
And we're not. We're going the opposite direction.
We are going obviously.
My point was that there are certain situations where it's very very overextensive to designate people employees. I've been a touring comedian for 15 years, and I can tell you that I am one of those cases. I can tell you that every comedian in the world would agree with that. Something like photojournalists, stuff like that. So my point is AB5 needed the appropriate carve-outs, which they were working on. It's not like they were non-existent. Right. They were working on getting those appropriate carve-outs. Drivers for Uber are not among those carve-outs because that's an essential part of the frickin' business. You need to designate them employees. But what Uber did was they went up against this with Prop 22. What they
bought and paid for a proposition, put it on the ballot. I mean, had the whole nine.
And they made themselves a carve out. They basically said what they sold to the people was first of all, they sold this idea that if they had to designate their drivers employees, all of a sudden their drivers would lose all of their ability to have flexible schedules, because there's no such thing as an employee who has a flexible schedule. That's never freaking happened in the history of ever. It's complete nonsense. They totally could have had a system that worked in a very efficient way where their employees got treated right, still enjoyed any flexibility they wanted to have, could be a designated full-time driver or a designated part-time driver, depending on the needs of Uber. Like their excuses were complete and utter BS, but they got away with it. The fear-mongering campaign,
they got away with it
enough, and it went through in California.
I mean, Ron, do you remember they would have that? And you know, I don't use Uber, but I remember people showing to me on their phone. There would be an ad that would pop up to vote yes on Prop 22 during the time it was hitting the ballot, to the night that, you know, elections happened. So they paid a lot of money, millions of dollars, to control
out the wazoo. They were
this
everywhere.
Narrative.
You would be having your cereal in the morning and a freaking talking gopher would pop up and tell you to vote on 22. They were freaking, it was nuts. I'd never seen anything like it. The biggest thing they talked about that election was Prop 22. And then the other thing people talked about ad nauseum was the whole daylight savings thing, which I'll be honest, I still don't fully get what the big deal is one way or another. I don't like.
Yeah, it's not.
I don't get it.
Things we need to fix in the world. That's, you know, and it's annoying, but whatever. You're right. There are bigger fish to fry.
I don't get my thing. I'm always just like, what do the farmers want to do? I'm cool with it. Like, I don't freaking. I don't know what the big deal is. So yeah, people have tried to explain it to me before, and I still don't. I'm like, I don't.
Yeah, I kind of gloss over.
I mean, I don't know, like. But anyway, that was a big deal. People were very interested in that. And then Prop 22, which we really failed. Now, over in the UK, they didn't fail. Uber tried to do the same bullshit over in the UK. And the UK was like, no.
Not having it.
Nice try. You're going to treat us right. You're going to make us employees. Nice freaking try. So they failed in the UK. but they succeeded here in the US. And as you could see, drivers are getting less and less. They're getting, penny pinched more and more. And it's just now in New York City in particular, you can tell it's like really hard on them because not only are they striking, but they also have a drivers co-op in New York too that they're working on, the drivers cooperative. I'm not sure how extensive it has or hasn't gotten. I know some friends that use it. So it does exist there. They're trying to.
That would make sense to me. So the drivers are creating an app that they can utilize themselves. And see, this makes more sense to me because Uber's taking the lion's share of the money. Even this is to me a classic story of worker exploitation, right? They're nothing without their drivers. Their app is just that. It's an app, right? Granted, it's helped to create this, this burgeoning marketplace. But for them to be taking the lion's share when it's really the drivers doing all the work is kind of ridiculous when you think about it. So it makes sense that they would develop a competing software or app that I would use that. That'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, all you need is like just the, I guess ingenuity to like make an app that's collaborative, and then the way they have it set up or the way it's supposedly set up. I'm not super familiar with them, but it's supposed to be a co-op. It's a straight up co-op that they all have like ownership of. So if we had something like that across the country, that'd be the best solution. And that would probably be able to put Uber and Lyft out of business, which would be fantastic. Because they're both freaking awful. I think Uber's even worse.
They're both awful.
But I don't even have Uber. I have Lyft. I haven't used it. I haven't used Lyft in forever.
I haven't used Lyft in 2 years, 3 years probably. I just, I started talking to a lot of these drivers and what they were putting up with, and it just was it was so bad. I'm like, I don't think I can support this. I'll find other ways to get around.
Well, and plus, like the Uber guy, like wasn't he a big Trumper too, or there was something else? Like,
I don't know, but that would shock me.
I mean, I'm sure they all are. It's just some are more vocal about it. Like I'm sure, I'm sure most of those, but most CEOs.
I mean, 25-cent raise, that's insane. The rate of inflation, that's not even going to. I think about all the things they also have to pay for upkeep on their vehicles. All of these things come out of their paycheck. They're not getting paid extra money for that.
Well, and again, that's how Uber gets away with it, right? Like they're like you're a contractor, so all of your gas costs are on you.
It's they have some ridiculous yours.
Yeah, they have a bullshit reimbursement thing, but it's a ripoff. The car is yours, or in some cases, you can get a car from them. But if you go that route,
you have to pay rent on it. That's the other thing they do now, which is
they screw you. No, it's basically when you have a society where people have no choice, that really just makes it ripe for exploitation. So how can they get away with it? Well, look at how they can get away with it. Their other option is to go to a job that doesn't pay them a freaking living wage. So you can either go to a job where you're going to give 8 hours of your freaking labor and you're not going to get a living wage, or you can think, well, I'll take my chances on this app if I really figure out the system. Because, to be totally fair here, there are some people that figured out the system that have made a lot of money doing this because they figured out a way to beat the casino, basically. Like there are ways where if you basically every customer, you have to see them as not just your ride, you have to see them as an opportunity. And you have to get them in the referral program.
Oh, so they're making it on tips and whatnot.
I've seen it. No, not just tips. What they do. No. So I've witnessed this. This is what they do. Get ready for this. This is kind of crazy. But people who really crack the Da Vinci Code, they have made money. And what they do is like when you're in their car, they will be like, hey, have you ever thought about trying this? And you either say yeah or no or whatever. And I bet they get a lot of people who are like, yeah, I could use some more money. So what they do, they get you to sign up. There used to be a program where
do they get referral fees or something?
They get referral fees, and then they tell you, hey, if you don't like it, just try it for like the couple weeks or whatever you got to do it for, and then just dump it.
And then you're done. Yeah.
And then if you're still not sold, if you're still not like, hey, I don't know, man, what they do is they say, tell you what, this is the commission I get for signing you up. I'll split it with you.
Oh.
So they basically like give you some of their money if you just do, and that's how, I mean, you do that enough. I mean, you're still making every ride you make, you're
like
putting
an
an
Uber
extra
Ponzi scheme.
pretty much. And you're putting at least an extra $100 in your pocket every ride you do. So
Yeah.
there are ways to
Okay.
like beat the system. But I bet out of every 20 drivers, one of them has figured that out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's like you're not gonna, it's stacked up against you.
Right.
Like it's like saying like, yes, somebody does win the lottery. Sure. Yes, somebody does be the exception to the rule. But you know what would be way better is if they just treated their frickin' drivers right and made sure they had a living wage. That would be even better by making them employees. So yeah, anyway. So shout out to the strikers in New York. I hope eventually co-ops overtake all of this stuff because these companies are absolutely terrible and evil. Like they're the worst. So should we move on to other great systems of exploitation?
Spy tech. The landlord eviction spy tech story. This is
it's great. Just great. Just wonderful that people do this. This is why I was part of a campaign to ban facial recognition, folks. This is why that shit's really bad. This is why it's really bad that Amazon has over 50% of all online commerce that happens in the world. And they also are in charge of the Ring cams. Isn't that interesting? Half of everything that comes to your doorstep is from us. So we're going to maybe create a problem. Oh, you need more security on your doorstep. Get this camera from us. By the way, this camera you're getting from us, we have a contract with
we have
law
access to all the footage. Yeah.
And so do the police. And we're not going to tell you what's in our contract with police. Tough cookies. That's what's going on. Well,
this is why my cameras are not Ring. I have a security system that I got this year, and I specifically was like, do not want one of these systems associated with Amazon or any of these other companies. I want control over
it's possible
what
to
happens.
Do. It's possible to do. You got to do your homework.
No, I bought a system where it's, it records on site at my house, a DVR kind of a system. So it's a little bit more old school, and they also have, you can upload it to the cloud if you pay extra money for this like third party company. But to me, it's worth not having my privacy invaded in that way. It's just not, it's not okay that's what's happening is happening. But this story, this is wild. So, it reminded me in many ways of Costa Hawkins. You've heard me talk about this. This was a bill that happened in California back in, I want to say 96, around there. But it basically took away local municipalities' ability to do rent control laws. And part of the argument that was used going into this was we have plenty of rent control apartments in the state. If we don't have some sort of incentive for land developers to take care of the older buildings that are falling apart, that's going to be really problematic. So we're going to grandfather in the existing apartments, and that'll be enough. And then whatever new buildings are built, those are the new ones, and it'll all be peachy keen and fine, right? But what's happened is it didn't take long for these land developers to realize, well, if I buy this building and I tear it down, well, I can just build a new building, and now there's voila, no rent control, which is true. So this is what's led to. So what's interesting to me about this story is they're now using these cameras.
Let's pull it up. So let's pull up.
So one of the things let's pull it up. One of the things they're doing though is they're telling these guys, we can get you out of rent control if you find somebody doing something illegal and you can evict them. You can now take those 2 apartments that are studios, knock down the wall, create a whole new apartment. It's a whole new 1-bedroom apartment now. Voila, no rent control.
So this is from Vice, y'all. Meet the spy tech companies helping landlords evict people. So scroll down to some of their marketing material. Okay, so this is literally the marketing.
Wait, read that. You can raise rent. Yeah.
Scroll back up.
This is insane.
So this is literally how they're marketing to people. You can raise, and by people, I mean landlords. You can raise rents in New York City, reads the headline of one promotional email sent to landlords. It was a sales pitch from Timin, a tech company that makes surveillance systems for apartment buildings. We make evil shit for evil people. Timin's sales pitch. Can we go back to the article? Timin's sales pitch proposes a solution to a frustration for many New York landlords who have tenants living in older apartments that are protected by rent control. 3 simple steps to re-regulate a unit. First, use one of Temen's automated products to catch a tenant breaking a law or violating their lease, such as having unapproved subletters or loud parties. So basically, have cameras everywhere you can and try to catch your tenant doing something they shouldn't, or just bullshit saying they did something the best you can. Then, quote unquote, vacate them and merge their former apartment with one next door or above or below, creating a new unit. This is not from a dystopian comedy, folks. This is real life.
This is real.
This is not The Onion. This is Vice. Unit that's not eligible for rent protections. Oh, here's another ad. Check this out. Combine a $950 a month studio and a $1,400 a month 1-bedroom into a $4,200 a month deregulated 2-bedroom. Yay! Wow. Tenants.
It's insane.
Help you identify which units are most likely open to moving out or being evicted. Housing advocates, we'll read this last paragraph. Housing advocates and surveillance experts say the practice of adopting surveillance technologies against renters has become increasingly common at a time when Black and Latino renters are disproportionately displaced by gentrification and overrepresented in eviction courts. So basically, you want to gentrify this neighborhood, you want to get people out, well, spy on them and bullshit your way into evicting them, and then you can knock down the walls. They're marketing this. I have to say,
I never thought I would see the day where somebody came up with this idea like, wait, why do we need to tear down the whole building and rebuild it? Let's just tear down a wall and combine them into a new apartment, and then it's a new spot. Like, to me, this is like the next level of what we've been seeing, right? So, I mean, because it's cheaper for them that way. They don't have to build a whole new building to get out of rent control. They just have to turn these smaller units into these more expensive 2-bedrooms, right? So
yeah,
this is crazy.
I mean,
we have a very serious problem with lack of affordable housing in the country, not just New York and California. It's really becoming a problem everywhere.
Everywhere it's becoming more expensive, and people are getting less and less as far as like what they're able to make. I mean, we are living in a time where, and we're going to get into this next, we're living in a time where there's going to be a lot more people that become housing insecure, and our next story, food insecure. Both those things are happening in freaking real time, and surveillance is helping it happen. These technologies are being actively used against people and against your fellow citizen. And when you have Ring, I mean, Ring is trading all of their information with law enforcement. And what are cops usually using that stuff for? They're usually using it to literally troll for nudes in some cases. We reported on that.
That's happened. That's what I'm saying. Who knows?
They try to get revenge on an ex. How many
there's
times?
Probably some officers that are actually investigating a crime that's who knows what. But
it has a 0% success rate, just so you know. So if there are officers doing that, it has a 0% success rate.
Is that true?
That's
true. Wild.
It has never helped them catch a bad guy, quote unquote, ever.
Wow.
So it's got, I mean, maybe some are trying.
So it's strictly just these guys 0%. That are, wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Wow. That's even worse.
Some have
that makes it even worse.
Yeah. No, some have successfully solicited nudes. Some have gotten revenge on an ex-girlfriend. Zero have ever caught a bad guy. Literally zero. So are some trying? Maybe. I kind of doubt even that. But even if they are, 0%. Big whopping 0% success rate.
Here's the other thing on that note, Ron. If they were investigating some sort of murder, rape, whatever, and they could still subpoena the footage and get a court order to be like, yes, we're investigating this rape crime, and it would be helpful to see if there's this is why we have a Fourth Amendment, right? This is why. So I don't think we should be discarding that just to make it convenient, because it breeds all of these really bad behaviors that you're talking about.
Yeah. Totally. I mean, and now you're seeing that they're making it a tool for predatory landlords. And
which
that Well, because they know like all the big companies are going to take advantage of it. They know that
100%.
all like the Black Rocks and all,
Right.
it's not like the
Right.
people looking to use this thing is just like, Joe mom and pop who have
Right.
like one investment property that's been in their family for like 30
Right.
years
No.
or something.
Yeah.
Like they're not part of the problem. It's the freaking investment
Yeah.
companies that try to
It's the
buy
hedge
all those
funds.
people out.
Yeah.
And it's
The
and
REITs, the
they
hedge
own
funds.
everything. They own
Yep.
everything. They own, I mean, what they do, especially in places like Southern California, anything that's reasonably priced for whatever reason, they'll just buy it for
They'll buy
cash.
it.
They'll flip it. And then if they can't find someone who's willing to pay the price they want them to pay, they'll just let it sit dormant because they have other properties. So the prices of all of that will go up.
Right.
And that's happening all over the country.
Yeah.
If you think that's
It's
unique
bad.
to LA and San Francisco, hate to disappoint you, it's happening everywhere. Is it the worst in like more, high traffic area places like New York, LA? Yeah, it's worse there, but it's going on everywhere. And it is a nationwide parasite. And surveillance is helping it. And this is why digital rights are really freaking important, my friends.
I agree.
Let's do a couple chats for a
Okay.
bit before we go to our next story about how food's going away. Tony DeMayo, what's up? Thank you for the super chat contribution. Hey Tina and Ron. Hey Tony, can you recommend any good books on surveillance capitalism? Yes, I can. I actually think it's literally called Surveillance. Oh wait,
Capitalism. Yeah, there is a book.
There's a book by Cory Doctorow called Checkpoint Capitalism: How Big Tech and Big Content Capture Creative Labor Markets and How We'll Win Them Back. And then I think Cory Doctorow has another book that's like strictly on surveillance capitalism. And I think it's literally just called something
Called Surveillance.
like that.
I think you're right. I have
It's,
not read
or
that. That was
no.
on my list.
So here's what it's called: How to Destroy Surveillance Capitalism.
Oh, okay.
So we were close. So Checkpoint Capitalism and How to Destroy Surveillance Capitalism, both by Cory Doctorow, who's a brilliant dude, really cool guy to interview too.
We should try to get an interview with him.
I recommend those two. I know it's two by the same author, but those are two really, really topical and good ones. So I recommend both of those, Tony. Ray, this is funny. Tina's getting roasted. Tina just binge watched Emily in Paris. Ha! Roasted.
Okay.
Yes. Love it. All right, we'll get to the rest after the next story. And by the way, keep those super chat coming, folks. We're gonna get to all of them here in just a minute. So please, your super chat contributions do help keep the show on the air. And smash the like button. Smash the freaking like button. Smash it. Smash it. It was talking smack. All of 2022, it was talking smack. So smash the like button now to show it who's boss in 23. So this is one of the things that Status Coup has been covering a lot that you don't see much of anywhere else, which is sad to see. But the Kroger Albertsons merge, we've been talking about that a lot. And to give a quick refresher, Kroger and Albertsons are trying to merge, and they're doing it at a time where our grocery prices are very high. Now, the reason we're given for those grocery prices being very high is bullshit. We'll get to that in just a second. But also, the fact that they're doing this now makes it even more concerning. It'd be concerning no matter what, but it's even more concerning right now because what they're going to try to do, they're going to monopolize our food chain, and then they're going to lock those high prices in.
Because lock the high prices in and the wages down.
Yes.
I one of the things that happened on the road to where we are today with this with Kroger and Albertsons is, at the beginning of the pandemic, they actually had employees that they were paying to deliver groceries, right? So it wasn't Instacart, right? So they were actually, you put your order in, it would be one of the employees of the grocery store that did this. And then they moved over to Instacart, right? So they sent out an email one day that was like, we're getting rid of these employees. You can now use Instacart blah, blah, blah. And of course, they try to tell you it's better for the consumer and, this, which is nonsense.
Right.
But I was like, okay, well, of course they're doing that. They don't want to pay the union labor because, these are union contracts with these grocery retailers. And if they go to Instacart, they've now gotten rid of the union labor. They're paying, very little to the third party, if anything at all. I think they just contract them out, actually. But mind you, they're independent contractors now, and that's a huge amount of money they're now saving that's going to go into their profits. So I think one of the biggest drivers of this merger, and hopefully the Department of Justice steps in and says, no, it's not acceptable. But I think one of the biggest benefits they're looking at is they want to keep labor costs down. They don't want the unions to come back.
Oh, they're already trying to lay people off. I mean, they're trying to lay, especially they can only go so far as like the actual labor, because, no matter how far you want to cut it back, and they're going to cut it back as much as they can, but you still need people to put food on the shelves,
Right. I mean,
so
Kroger
going after labor.
They're going after labor. Remember, they tried to shut down the three of their stores. They actually tried to shut down a year and a half ago
because
I
people tried to unionize. Yeah. Right.
And I was like, you're kidding. They would rather walk away from having these stores than to pay these folks, what would have been, I think, $3 more an hour or something. So they ended up stepping away from 2 of the stores, I believe. I can't remember now. It's been a while. But nonetheless, this is where
they're already trying to gut their offices. Because it's like they can't, okay, we're going to try to, stretch labor as far as we can go, but we're still going to need someone still needs to put the food on the shelf. We can only go so far there. I mean, we're going to exploit them as much as we can, but like their offices and stuff like that, they're basically eliminating people because guess what? You don't need marketing when you have a freaking monopoly, and they know that.
And they will absolutely have a monopoly. That. I mean,
so
they're already giant retailers. They're already mini monopolies.
Yeah. So here's something that dropped today. Let's go. I mentioned earlier how, their whole, inflation is why your grocery prices are high. That's bullshit. Here's a tweet from More Perfect Union that shows why that is complete and utter bullshit. Basically, check this out. Food companies want you to believe that despite price increases last year, they're making less due to inflation. But the first major food company earnings report of 2023 just revealed that that's a lie. Food price gouging is paying off big time. They're getting record profits here. So it goes on to say, Conger Brands, owner of Ready Whip and Duncan Hines. Is that how you say it?
Conagra? Yeah.
Conagra.
Conagra.
Like Viagra with a con. All right, I got you. All right. Con Viagra.
Aggressive. Sorry.
It ends with an A, doesn't it? You're messing around.
Yes, I'm being silly.
Oh, all right. So all right. So listen, Aggravated Viagra, the owner of Ready Whip and Duncan Hines, just posted record sales of $3.3 billion and expanded profit margins. Management used a series of price increases to increase margins. So it was all bullshit, y'all. It was all bullshit. They didn't need they price gouged. They used, and by the way, a lot of people have been saying that for the longest time. They're using what's happening as an excuse. And they're causing the problem. They're causing the problem because they're raising the prices. So that's what's really going on. Now, I want to jump real quick to a propaganda piece. That's what this is, by the way. This is a propaganda piece from a food industry site. Now, the reason I wanted to bring this up, again, this gets specifically into the Kroger-Albertsons merger. And this piece of propaganda is doing their dirty work. It's amazing. Because when they met with the FTC, the basic big thing that I think it was even a Republican who said it, for crying out loud. But the big thing they told Kroger and Albertsons was, you guys haven't justified why this merger is necessary. And we're not really sure why you guys should be able to do this. How is the world a better place with you guys merging? It's so apparently a terrible idea that even the United States government smells bullshit. That's how ridiculous it is. That even they're thinking, hey, we know our donors would love this, but we don't know if we could pull this one off. So, Colin, can we pull up the piece, the food industry?
This is wild.
What is it? Food industry executive.
This is like the ultimate gaslighting.
Oh my God. So this is foodindustryexecutive.com. Their name should tell you everything you need to know where they're coming from. Clearly, this is a not an unbiased news source, folks. This is an industry publication that's helping out the merger people. Why the Kroger-Albertsons merger could be a win-win for the industry and customers. This is from Food Industry Executive. Here, wait, check it out. Scroll slowly. Oh, they did finally put. Okay, so before they didn't even put who the authors were. They did.
I was just noticing that. Wait.
They did now. Here, scroll down, Colin. So they did. What an awesome photo descriptor, by the way. 2 women shopping at a grocery store. Look at that. 2 women shopping at it, in case you weren't sure. All right, so they did give the name of the authors. Before, it just said, like, by the industry, because it was such bullshit. Anyway, in mid-October, all right, so they're trying to merge. Here, scroll down a little bit. All right, so listen to this. For Kroger,
let's get to the propaganda. There's some good propaganda in here. Like,
so scroll down. They're saying why it's good for Kroger and Albertsons. We can sum that up for you. They'll make a fuck ton of money. And
all right, here, as the grocery industry, starting there, really. Yeah.
Here, wait, scroll down a little more because they do the bullet points. They do the bullet points. They do these bullet points where they're like, oh yeah, and here they try to have you scroll down. It's like it's past the okay, so check this out. It's at the well, now it's nowhere. But it's potential opportunities.
We're struggling today.
Is it there?
I don't.
Oh, here it is. Yes, this is it. All right, it wasn't bullet points. It was just in bold. My bad. All right, so there are 2 customer-centric opportunities created as a result of this merger. All right, so smart personalization. That's bullshit. That means nothing.
Wait, nobody goes grocery shopping looking for smart personalization. That's just bizarre.
Let me just give some freaking life advice to anyone who's single out there. If you are ever on a dating app and someone under their interests lists smart personalization, swipe left immediately. What the hell does that even mean? They are a walking PR piece of a human. All right, but here's this bullshit. For decades, grocery brands focused on scaled reach and mass marketing to engage and retain customers. In case you didn't know you need fucking food to live, they had some marketing for that. They relied heavily on milk, bread, and eggs loyalty. You know, the shit that people eat. Have you ever seen an advertisement for bread? Probably not. It's something people just know exists and they eat it. But anyway, however, increasingly discerning consumer choices, including emerging preferences for blah, 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 along with, so a strong recommendation engine can renew foregone brand loyalty. Grocery chains can help to drive future purchases by prompting the purchase of frequently occurring or last purchase items through push notification or custom email campaigns. No. All this means is that they're going to know what you bought and they're going to encourage
and they're
going to
send you emails telling you need to buy more. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of not reading the room,
is it? This means nothing. They're saying this is why you should be fine with a merger that's going to price you out of food. Because of
well, then they go on to argue that it's actually not going to price you out of food. Like,
oh, they say that. All right, so let's go back to this bullshit. This is amazing. So, all right, so I think we covered the smart.
I mean, they should have said to take this to the next level and just stopped right there.
So here we go. Rewards. Oh, here it is. Here it is. Wait, scroll back up. The rewards portion. So rewards. Both Kroger and Albertsons have been praised for their outstanding loyalty programs. Yeah, they already have those. They don't need to freaking merge.
Right.
So combined with blah, 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 blah. So they're going to, have their rewards program that they already have. A subscription economy. It is critical for the joint brand to identify the core reason that current customers are subscribed to Kroger and Albertsons individually and what value the merged entity could offer to consumers.
It's to save money. How do they not see that? I mean, most people, when they join these things, it's because they want access to the coupons, the discounts that they offer only. Like, people are desperate to save money on their grocery bills. There's no giant mystery here, but they're trying to frame it as if it's something other than that, right? Brand loyalty became less of a thing because people realized that they could buy the same quality of a consumer good from a no-name brand for $1 less. That is what destroyed sort of the brand loyalty
Tina,
that was. Yes.
Tina, don't you know we live in a world where people are thirsty for more digital marketing? Listen
you
to
are
this.
If you're a multi-millionaire, but who are they talking to here? I mean, does everybody that shop at Kroger's and Albertsons, they're not multi-millionaires. This is the Erewhon customer.
They're just
they're
temporarily embarrassed multi-millionaires. That's what they are. They'll be a millionaire next week. And when they do, they're going to want some more digital marketing in their life. Look, on the retail media business side, the combination of already established Kroger Precision Marketing and the Albertsons Media Collective would serve over 85 million households. Don't miss out, providing cross-country reach, an extensive store of transactional data, and an impactful advertising opportunity. It's basically saying you're going to love this merger because it's going to make it easier for us to try to sell you shit.
Market you.
What?
I know. We're going to lock in our profits. It's insane. There's no part of this that makes sense for the consumer. That's what was wild to me when I read this thing. When you sent it to me, I'm like, wow, this is wild. They're not addressing anything here that makes sense for a consumer at all.
But they're doing
what's right for a profit-driven corporation. Yeah.
They're doing their homework for them, because if the government comes to you, if the FTC comes to you and says, we don't understand why this merger is necessary, then they go to food industry executive or whatever the hell it's called. And they say, hey, how can you justify this being necessary? Well, we get to price gouge people and make more money. Yeah. We don't want to say that part out loud, though. Come up with something else. And the reason I wanted to share this, just so you all know, that's the best they could freaking come up with.
Which is not,
that's absolute
nonsense.
Bullshit. That makes no sense. Smart personalization. What does that even mean? Besides nothing. That was cooked up in a freaking PR branding brainstorming session between a bunch of freaking evil people.
Bunch of shoppers that go to Erewhon and nowhere else. Like, when I say Erewhon, do people know what I'm talking about?
No, I actually don't know what you're talking
about. It is this ridiculously overpriced grocery store on the west side.
Do you wear your hat when you go there?
I don't go there.
Yeah.
I went there once to cover a protest, and literally I was like blown away that anybody would ever shop in this store. It's where all the really wealthy Venice people go to shop, and everything is like 5 times what you would spend even at Whole Foods. It's ridiculous.
So is it like, so the only kind of like sort of hoity-toity place I will occasionally go in for like a small thing is Gelson's. Is it like way?
Oh, it's way beyond Gelson's. Like it makes Gelson's look like the 99-cent store. Oh my god!
Wow.
Yes.
All right. So Gelson's is as fancy as I get. That's my.
This place makes Gelson's look like the 99-cent store, dude. Like it's
all right. Well, hey, I'm not as fancy as you. I'm not hip.
I just know it exists. I don't shop there.
No, all power to you. I know. Yeah, no, Gelson's is so. Yeah, this merger is absolutely terrible, and seriously, like, I know it's ridiculous that that's the best explanation they could come up with, but like, joking aside, like, this is
the danger is real that the DOJ won't enforce antitrust here because there's been a pattern of the last 15, 20 years where they haven't. And it is detrimental to consumers. It's detrimental to the economy writ large, in my opinion. Hopefully this is a bridge too far, though. I mean, they're both mini monopolies already in their own right. I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
If this goes through, though, there's going to be more food insecure people. Like that's just like more people are going to legit.
It'll put people like me and you in that bracket. I mean, this is like, it's becoming really tough as it is.
And I can't grow tomatoes. I've tried and I failed freaking miserably.
Can't either.
It's like bad. Like I'm like shit. Well, I guess this could get weird. Because like this is, and
it's bad.
No one's talking about it. And you're seeing how it's like they clearly, it's all a ruse. But because this merger's happening now, it's not a coincidence it's happening now. It's not a coincidence. They saw prices spiking and they say, now's our chance to lock it in. That's the same. Yeah. Like that's why it's like, remember when gas, like gasoline spiked completely and George W. Bush accidentally said the quiet part out loud. He said consumers will get used to this. Remember when that happened?
I do.
And he was proven correct. Yes, they fluctuated a bit, but he was proven correct. And the oil and gas companies knew they could get away with it. That's why they've been making record profits since. The same thing is happening now, but it's with food. It's with freaking food. I mean, this is really serious. And this is the bullshit they're going to use to try to sell it. And yeah, on shows like this, we can laugh at it because we see how freaking ridiculous it is. But you know what? A corporate bought FTC might fall for it. Or, intentionally fall for it. You know what I mean? Fall for it.
Yeah, 100%. Regulatory capture is also a problem.
So folks, we'll keep covering it here and we'll see what happens. I mean, their goal is to get this through by 2024. And by they, I mean Kroger, Albertsons. So there's still some time for them to stop this, but we'll see. I mean, there's not really reason to be convinced one way or another. They did have a little pushback, but who knows if it'll be enough. So, folks, let's go to some more super chats and chats here. Teresa, what's up? I'll read this one, and I'll mention where I'll be. Ron, I will try my hardest to see you Saturday. I hope it's a full house or campground. Thank you very much for that, Teresa. I hope you can make it Saturday. And folks,
that's in San Diego.
Catch me Saturday. I will be in San Diego Saturday night, folks. And guess what? That's a free show. You can't afford not to go. So San Diego this Saturday, January 7th. Come hang out. Can't wait to see you. I'll mention where else I'll be. January 28th, I will be in Tucson, Arizona. Get tickets now, Tucson, because the early bird special ends soon. If you grab them right now, you can use the promo code Lucy at checkout for discounted tickets. That's January 28th. That's a stand-up show and the screening, the premiere screening of a short film I made called Loners. So I'm real excited for that show. And February 10th, April 14th, and May 12th, I will be in Los Angeles working out my 2023 hour. I'll have more tour dates soon. RonPlacone.com for all tickets. Henry, what's up? I bet home care agencies would be better if they were worker-owned co-ops.
I agree.
I hear you. Absolutely.
100%. Better for the clients, too.
Yeah, no kidding. Carl says laws could be made that if you rebuild a building, it is still rent controlled. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it would take, and for example, it would take in the state of California overturning Costa-Hawkins that it used to be the case that was true. So we have to unravel, I guess is a good word, some of the laws that were put on the books in the last 3 decades pertaining to that.
I mean, it's rough, and they're like, even when they build stuff, when it comes to housing, you don't always know. Like, they'll be like, well, some of it's going to be affordable housing, and you're like, well, what does that mean exactly?
Well, when you look at the percentages, I mean, it's very minimal units often. I mean, which is kind of when we were in San Pedro, I was talking to that woman, they were building the new development down there. And I was asking her, like, what percentage of these are actually affordable? And what is considered affordable? Because if it's $2,300 a month, that's still not affordable. And if you're going to tell me it's only 5 units, also not enough. So,
well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Cause it's like when they say, well, we're going to have some affordable and some quote unquote market, a lot of times that means the affordable quote unquote is affordable compared to the market. So,
but it doesn't mean it's affordable.
Exactly. So it's just like, well, your option is that just this apartment that's super expensive or this luxury freaking unit for $5,000 a month. So this other thing's affordable compared to that. And it's like, oh, that's not how this works. That's not affordable housing. So
no, it's not.
It's a racket. I mean, it's a freaking racket. Tony Dallas, what's up? Off corporate landlords, F them into the molten core of the earth. WTAF. Guys, you should check out Tom Nicholas' video on housing crisis. UK is wild.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure. Well, everywhere's got their issues. I would venture to say the UK does not have it as bad as we do as far as the housing.
I don't know. London's pretty damn expensive, I have to say. London is crazy expensive. Way worse than LA.
Yeah, it is way more expensive than LA, but I think they do have, again, compared to us, I mean, they're pretty capitalist over there too. I mean, it's not like they're not some.
I mean, at least they have universal health care and some other things that we don't have, but
they have healthcare, and I do think they have more affordable housing compared to compared to LA or compared to New York.
I don't know.
think I can't say for sure, but they definitely don't have as much homelessness. So I'm assuming they have better housing solutions than we do.
I don't know.
I mean, I don't know how much better, but I would say better.
We need to look into it, I guess. I'll check that out.
Yeah, I mean, usually when the United States is involved, I'm inclined to say the United States is worse, but that's my own bias. But I don't know. I mean, London is crazy expensive. London is more expensive. I think New York and London are neck and neck, but London is definitely more expensive than LA by a lot.
Yeah.
And
I would say San Francisco's up there too.
I think London and San Francisco are neck and neck. And then New York, I think New York kind of beats everybody. I think maybe like only Tokyo, maybe. I'm not even sure.
Tokyo's expensive too. I've been to Tokyo.
Tokyo might just be the biggest though. It might not be the most expensive. Right. I'm not sure. But I know, I mean, like the most expensive, it's like London, Dublin. Dublin's crazy. Dublin, Ireland is expensive as hell. And, you know, you wouldn't expect it to be that. I mean, it's a wonderful place. I love visiting there, but it is crazy expensive. Anyway, all right, we're kind of getting sidetracked. We got to get to Right Wing Insanity Report. Das Buschfleisch, which by the way, a very wonderful city of the world that is actually affordable by scale is Berlin, Germany. Berlin, Germany, one of my favorite cities in all the world, and one of the cities of the world. I don't know if Das Buschfleisch lives in Berlin. I know that they live in Germany, but Berlin actually has a lot of social safety nets there that makes it a pretty affordable city. They have price controls, rent controls. They have
free university.
They have a law that's like really cool. I forget what it's actually called, but it's like if you want to go to an opera or something like that, you can afford to do it pretty much no matter what, because they have scaled seating is required.
Oh, scaled pricing and tickets.
Scaled pricing. So if you know, I mean, obviously a front row seat is more expensive than the back row, but you know, like you can get the cheap seats and it's like very affordable. So whether you're the richest person in Berlin or, you know, not near as wealthy, you can go to pretty much any cultural activity, which is pretty cool. And Des Buschfleisch says, I wonder if freezing deaths in the richest country of the world are preventable. No shit, right? Like, gee, I wonder if we could do something about that.
They should
crazy.
be.
Crazy. Well, thank you, Tony DeMeo. Thank you, Tony Dallas. A lot of the Tonys giving the super chats today. Much appreciated. And thank you, Des Buschfleisch. And guys, if you want to become a member here at Status Coup, you can go to statuscoup.com/join. Your membership funds independent journalism. It allows Status Coup to go on the ground at the Uber protest. It allows Tina to go to Vegas for the Hillary 24 rally. It allows Jordan to cover the beat. You get the idea. No, she's at a conference in Vegas. It's not the Hillary 24 rally. But I am making her pink cat ears. I am going to do that. And she's going to tape them on that hat. But yeah, so statuscoup.com/join. And yeah, go ahead and I guess I'll turn it over to you, Tina. Let people know what's happening.
Yeah, all right. So this week on Right Wing Insanity Report, I have Eddie Kim joining me. Eddie Kim he's a journalist that has been in Vice, The Guardian. He was on staff at Mel Magazine. But he covers right wing extremism and also political and society issues. But I have him on to discuss, in particular, white wing extremism as it pertains to the Asian community. So on both sides, right? How hate crimes have been increased for Asian Americans and how they're becoming more and more a target. And then also how we're now seeing right wing extremists that are also Asian and participating with white nationalists in certain things. So it's a very interesting conversation. He is a member of this community. He's an expert in what he's talking about. So I hope everybody enjoys that. And if you missed it today, replay will be on Saturday. I know it's a long show today for Ron and I. And also, I think Eddie and I talked for a good hour and 20 minutes, so a long day. But if you missed it today, please join in on Saturday. We do replays on Saturday. I'm Tina-Desiree Berg reporting for Status Coup News. This week on the Right Wing Insanity Report, I am bringing in a guest, Eddie Kim. He writes for Mel magazine based out of San Francisco currently, but you've also seen his work in The Guardian, Vice News, and other areas. He writes about right-wing extremism, obviously from an Asian point of view. So we're going to talk today about not only the increase in Asian hate crimes at the hands of right-wing extremists, but also the fact there is right-wing extremism that exists within the community. So welcome, Eddie.
Tina, thank you very much for having me.
Yes, very excited to have this conversation. This is one area of right-wing extremism that just doesn't seem to be getting a lot of attention, and I think it should be. We've been seeing massive increases in hate crimes against the Asian community for the last 3 years running. I wanted to put up this article to show you 2021, the explosion we had. We don't have the data yet for 2022. It's, January, the first week of January, so they haven't released that yet. But I think given what I've been seeing this year, it won't be shocking to have another increase. But the number of hate crimes in California rose for the third year in a row in 2021 and included a sizable uptick in the number of anti-Asian crimes, according to a report from the Attorney General. The California Department of Justice released its annual report on hate crimes on Tuesday morning, noting 1,763 reported hate crimes, up from 33% the year prior, which is, I think a lot of people thought that when Trump was gone, this stuff would kind of tamp down, and it hasn't. Hate against Asian Americans saw another year of triple-digit percentage increases, with crimes increasing 177.5%. So I wanted to, talk with you a little bit about this. I don't think it's abating yet, and I think it was originally being driven by COVID. Trump called it the Chinese flu, the Asian flu. It just sort of started this chain reaction snowball where people were blaming lockdowns, just having the disease itself on the Asian community, which is completely unfounded. But I think that started the ball rolling. But I also don't think it's the only thing influencing that. What is your perspective?
Well, it's so strange because, obviously I've been talking to my parents about this. They actually moved in retirement back to South Korea last year. Right. And one of the last conversations I had with them was about the need for me to stay safe doing the work that I do, being out at protests and things like that. But also the feeling like the hens had come home to roost, as my dad kind of put it, in the sense that I think for a lot of Asian people in this country, there is a sentiment that we are an invisible minority, not vilified in quite the same way as the Black and Latino communities, but still subject to a lot of harassment and a lot of violence. And there's been a lot of academia and reportage on exactly why that's persisted for so long since the immigration waves of the 1970s till now. And it really is a moment where I think with the increased visibility around Asian people and Asian Americans specifically, with Trump's sort of declaration around the China virus and sort of the right-wing acceptance of that rhetoric. But I think it also made us visible in the sense that in some statistical ways, certain groups of Asian Americans are excelling in America right now, in terms of the arguments about college admissions and affirmative action. A lot of Asians are on the side of, hey, we are high achieving. We have demonstrated something. We are perhaps the model minority. And I really push back against that rhetoric, the model minority myth, and how harmful it is and how it flattens Asian Americans, which is such a 2D term to begin with, into sort of a singular body. When in fact, Asian Americans is a demographic that has some of the fastest rising wealth inequality in all of America, right? But I think that increased visibility made Asian Americans more of a threat. It made them seem even more other than before. And it's not just because of the COVID relationship, but I think decades of our communities expanding, gaining some generational wealth in some demographics, and otherwise becoming a little bit more visible, a little bit more visible, a little bit more visible. And it made me think about this 2020 paper that I just read in the journal Criminology. And it basically looks at how hate crimes come from inspirations around political threat and emboldenment of people who are opposed to certain kinds of change, progressivism, and certainly growth in minority communities. And I found it fascinating that Immediately after emancipation in 1865, the Ku Klux Klan formed as a means to preserve white supremacy, right? And when members of the Black community gained economic status in various U.S. cities through the middle of the century, the communal backlash against them from white America and extremists was very, very severe. And so I think in moments of visibility and legitimacy, hey, Asian Americans are a part of America, Asian immigrants are a part of America and will continue to be, it just made the threat seem so much more clear. And I think that is continuing to persist. And it's just one in sort of a rainbow of different right-wing things, subjects that they believe are battlegrounds. And that also includes LGBTQ spaces, drag expression. It also involves myths around Black criminality and violence. It's all the same stuff. And they're sitting at this buffet right now saying, what's going to stick today? What's going to stick today? And unfortunately, as we've seen from these hate crime numbers, Asian American targets have just been
exploded.
That much more obvious. Yeah, that much more clear.
And I wonder, you mentioned higher education, and I think that is an interesting conversation to have right now, because there is a backlash to the admittance numbers of Asian Americans in Ivy League schools, public Ivy League schools and whatnot. And do you think that maybe the jealousy surrounding that, or the anger surrounding that, is real, because now you've got maybe some white guys that have not applied themselves in the same way as an Asian American student might have, right? Didn't do quite as much homework to get all the A's in AP classes, didn't maybe do well on the SAT, whatever. But instead of really taking a look at themselves, they're going to blame the fact that there's a lot of Asian Americans that did do that work and were admitted, into these universities. And I have to say, when I was at UC Irvine, I was kind of turned off a lot by some of the rhetoric that even existed then. They would call UCI the University of Chinese Immigrants. Like, it was a thing that the white dudes would say. And I would be like, wow, really? I'm like, you're just pissed because you guys, don't rule the roost anymore, so to speak. And when we got rid of, let me say this, when we got rid of affirmative action, it had the opposite effect. All of these guys were convinced that that's why these students were getting in to the university or UC, right? Turns out that wasn't the case. And then even fewer white dudes were admitted. Like, the numbers of women that got increased as well. So oopsie on that. But what are your thoughts on that?
It's a good point. And it's something that I'm trying to parse out right now. I'm writing a long essay on meritocracy in higher education, and simply the fact that, listen, the vast majority of Asian people who go to, higher education in this country do not go to Ivy Leagues. They do not go to prestigious schools. The vast majority of Ivy League seats go to white people who have legacy. Who have athletics, who have other forms of merit, which often in this country that means daddy or mommy paid a lot of big bucks to a school. And so, so number one, yes, Tina, I absolutely have heard the bitterness, the sort of jealousy around Asian achievement in academia, the typical digs about, they have no personalities, they're just good at studying. In fact, that's what Harvard University, this lawsuit against them right now, that's what they're trying to parse out with the Supreme Court, is that, why is there such a huge gap between what teachers and cohorts say about a student, not just academically, but in terms of their personality and their generosity, whatever, their character traits. And why are Harvard admissions people saying, oh, these Asian kids are kind of boring and they're flat and their grades might be good, but they're scoring low on things like curiosity and courage,
which is nuts. That is, oh my God. Yeah, I saw that. It's crazy.
Right. And so now we see it once again, how the idea of a model minority myth cuts both ways, right? You can't have it both ways, and yet that's exactly how the rhetoric spreads. Either people are doing too well, and that's why literally it's a white man who is leading the charge on this affirmative action lawsuit with the Supreme Court, has for a very long time, but has gotten a coterie of Asian voices and supporters who are also believing that this excellence is inherent and needs to be protected in some way. I think if you look further into the research, it's so much more complicated than that.
Of course,
Even just the fact that, here in San Francisco, there's huge controversy over a prestigious public school named Lowell, and it has a disproportionately high Asian population. And honestly, research is starting to show that in environments like that, if you put anybody, including a student who is struggling, into that environment with better resources, cohorts and peers who are more engaged, et cetera, turns out that their achievement increases. And so it's just a very complicated swirl of identity politics and sort of social pride too, right? Like, I was taught that I needed to be studious because that was going to be my way of like making it in the world. I don't know, at 32, whether that's panned out exactly the way I envisioned at 17, but nonetheless, this is something that also comes from within our own homes.
That's right.
And our
it's
own
culture.
cultures.
But it's not just Asian cultures that view education that way. A lot of the Scandinavian countries do too, but nobody wants to talk about the way Finland perceives its education system.
No, nobody wants to talk about Nigerian excellence in American higher ed.
Cuban even. I mean,
Yes, that's right. The list goes on.
Yeah.
But to kind of circle back, I think this is why it's so interesting to wonder, why does white America look at Asians as a threat? And when do we not appear as a threat? Because I've also written about the sort of biases and racism within like the dating pool, online dating pools and sexual culture. Asian men routinely rank the lowest among all groups racially in terms of attractiveness in that online setting. So there's a lot going on. And I think what has been very good to see is that in one way or another, Asian families, Asian couples, Asian communities are talking about this and thinking about this explicitly. And unfortunately, I think for all the good that does, it also leads some people down the rabbit hole. Down the rabbit hole of saying, why is society like this? How do I fix it? And I think that's where a lot of certainly right-wing extremists stand and how they see themselves in the mirror. And that includes Asian extremists who are right-wing. I think something that is not very much discussed in this country, and I'm mulling a magazine story on it, is what Asian conservatism looks like, what Asian reactionaries sound like. And I think that is a really sort of untapped world.
I agree.
That has, again, very deep roots in America and sort of original waves of immigration here.
In fact, and we're going to talk about this in a minute. I want to talk about an article you wrote in Mel Magazine in regards to the way the right-wing extremists fantasize about Asian women, because I think this is pertinent to the conversation as well. But yeah, right-wing extremists within the Asian community absolutely exist. I have interviewed several of them, including one that was a sovereign citizen. And that is an incredibly extreme anti-government viewpoint, right-wing militia, like I don't believe in paying taxes kind of viewpoint. So any community is not going to be monolithic, right? There's going to be expansion of beliefs politically and otherwise within the community. And I just think people struggle with when they look at a community that they're not a member of, it's just more easy and convenient for them if they can put it into a box, which is never the right thing to do, because you're going to lead yourself down all kinds of wrong pathways. You published a piece I want to put up for a second here, because I thought this was a really good lens with which to discuss this particular subject material. Asian women have always been a deadly obsession of white men. And, I think that this is definitely true. We can see it not only with the stereotype, right, but just in the real world. You're opening this piece talking about the guy that committed this horrible mass shooting of several spas. He fetishized and otherwise scapegoated for a pandemic abused behind closed doors, even gunned down. Asian hatred is a designed piece of the American experiment. Yeah. So at some point on Tuesday, March 15th, a 21-year-old with a Richard Spencer haircut, which is that very fascist haircut, and a scraggly red beard walked into Big Woods Goods in Canton, Georgia, and bought a 9mm pistol. He planned on driving to more spas and massage parlors in Florida, but for now, the motive is officially unclear. There's no end to the chatter on Chan boards, meaning 8chan, 4chan, Reddit and Twitter about why Robert Aaron Long chose spas that were allegedly Asian owned. Was it a racist hate crime? Was he more of a misogynist? Was it a religious fervor based on his Baptist beliefs? I'm guessing it's probably a little bit of all of that, but walk us through your thoughts on this.
You know, in that next paragraph, I basically say maybe a motive is almost beyond the point, because again and again, we've seen young and middle-aged and older white male shooters, killers, choose to go out in the sort of the trope of a blaze of glory. And even if they have manifestos, even if they have online Reddit posts, even if they have sort of a journal that seems to explain what happened, I mean, often violent expression is just the last thing someone thinks about. It's effectively suicide. And so it's confusing. And instead of it being like, oh, like Trump talked about COVID and that's what inspired this guy to go out, I think it's so much more complicated than that. I think it is an example of how there is great harm in a lack of representation and a lack of humanization of minority people in this country. And so when somebody like that gentleman goes into a fury and goes into their own radicalized spiral, and they need to get it out, they need to get that feeling out, they're going to look to people that they think, oh, there will be others who are on my side, at least. You know, it may be less of a pointed, I'm going to look for an Asian person and do it. Although, of course, that happens. I don't want to downplay explicit acts of Asian targeting.
Right.
But sometimes I think it's just that society has painted people in a way that makes them seem less important, less human, and more symbolic rather than an individual of flesh and bone. And I think, you know, I kept thinking about that while writing that piece. Maybe that's me trying to downplay some of the human horror of all of this. But I think the genuine reality and why it's not easy to fix this through conventional means like policing and criminal justice is because this is the result of decades and decades and decades of political and social pressure that makes certain people feel under attack. Now, if you really look hard, the people under attack are Muslims, are undocumented Latina people, are undocumented Asian people, are poor Asian people. But I think the narrative has made it such where, you know, we talk a lot about the great replacement theory among white extremists and white conservatives. I think this is an expression of that fear, of that tension. And so, it is obvious that he bought a gun and was looking for the right target. The right target happened to be Asian women. And when you look back decades and decades into the 1800s, into even the 1700s, you see that Asian women have been fetishized as both
docile.
Yes. Yeah. And they've both been portrayed positively and negatively within that trope in American culture and film, etc. And so when somebody thinks of who can I kill and get away with it, maybe that's what plays into this sort of invisibility of the real humanity of the community. I certainly, other minority communities know exactly what this is like when they are targeted as a result of white fear. And that's exactly why, you know, Tulsa burned down. Right. You know, that was Black Wall Street. And that's not a coincidence. But it's also not as easy as saying, oh, people planned on just destroying the Black economic sort of market and that's their goal and they pulled it off. No, there's so much more behind it.
There is so much more behind it. I wanted to switch gears and talk about right wing extremism within the Asian community. I think this is a really important part of the conversation too. I think a lot of people on the outside that don't pay attention to these movements are often shocked to discover that there are, you know, quote unquote white nationalists that are not white. And it's a thing everywhere, not just within the Asian community, but also within the Hispanic community, the Black community, you name it. It exists. You know, it's sort of predicated, I think, as roots in just fascist nationalist ideals to begin with, and it just grows from there. I think what's unique about the interior of the Asian community is it's often perceived on the outside as the closest proximity to white.
Yeah.
And I want to highlight for a minute that a lot of the old school nationalists, right, and also race scientists, race-based scientists that want to talk about race being real and attributes being assigned to race, right? A lot of them have had to grapple with Asian data on IQ and a whole host of other things because it doesn't fit neatly into there's a hierarchy and white people are at the top, right?
Yeah.
So it's a very messy conversation. I want to pull up an article that I thought, this is from the Global Network for Extremism. So they do a lot of reporting on and research in this area, where they're talking about, I'm going to scroll down to this one paragraph. Oopsie, hang on. Just lost my mouse. There we go. That really kind of gets to the crux of this. So it is crucial to recognize that far-right, alt-right, or even red pill movements that exist in Southeast Asia are just as heterogeneous and diverse as the people living in the region. Yeah. As part of this, the extremist ideology adopted by the 2 detainees in Singapore should not be interpreted as an unprecedented phenomena in Southeast Asia, but one that has existed for some time and has been generally accepted. The general hostility towards communism and socialism, and I think this is part of the conversation right there, mainly amongst the Asian 5 countries, can make it difficult to treat far-right and alt-right ideas as potential problems, especially when many of the concepts were borrowed from recent Western far-right thoughts to be reshaped and localized for mainstream appeal. Although it is tempting to conclude that both youths and adopted Western-style far-right extremism in response to Islamicist extremism, I can't get that out, this is only a superficial interpretation. It is necessary to dive deeper into the ongoing politics of othering, be it Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, or any other Southeast Asian state. Existing far-right movements in various states share ethno-religious aspirations to preserve the purity of their respective nations, separate from the presence of other religions or ethnicities that are not considered to have a legitimate claim in the state. And I think also, getting rid of globalism in general that they feel has been very problematic for the country. I think Malaysia, you could look at that for. So what is your take on that? Do you think that's sort of a good lens to view these things from as a starting point? What are your thoughts?
It's a big lens. One of the core questions that example makes me think about, and that article, which is excellent, makes me think about is, how do modern eras of political and cultural division, and especially economic inequality, how do they lead to extremist violence as counterculture? And what picture of the past exists to inspire the reactionary ideas today? Yeah. And when you think about things like national purity, what I really think about is things used to be better when things were simpler and things were more stable. Yeah. And we can blame cultural heterogeneity as the thing. A lot of people, including in the West, fetishize, well, especially Western far-right extremists, often fetishize places like Japan and South Korea, which are very homogeneous nations, and they believe that creates stability. Yeah. But that's ironic because when you talk about Asian reactionaries and Asian far-right, I mean, South Korea, I wrote about this for Mel extensively, they voted in their sort of de facto Trump figure. South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol ran on sort of young male discontent. He ran on talking points that were anti-feminist, that were anti-communist, that were basically kind of from the buffet table that we see Western extremists pull from in terms of political rhetoric. I'm not saying it's the exact same situation. America is a very, very different country. But I think that's a good example of how, things are not always what they seem. And I want to bring that back home to the US, to the point I made earlier that Asian conservatism is a powerful force. On my TikTok thread right now, or FYP right now, I can see memes about young Asian people saying, there go my parents saying something toxic or cancelable again, because this exists in our communities. Racism, classism, colorism exists in the
That's huge,
Asian
actually.
Community.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, exactly. And that goes back to what I said about how Asian Americans as a demographic have some of the worst wealth inequality in the last 25 years. And it's because we we're sort of grouping everyone together. But to that point, I think there is even a huge phenomenon of young Asian Americans in this country and people on social media spaces talking about very like racist, white supremacist talking points like, hey, what the media won't talk about is all these hate crimes are done by Black people. And like, if only common sense policing would come back, we could lock up all these Black violent people, then, you know, we could save our Asian elders from being assaulted. And of course, there's no real, you know, within those thought circles, there's not real interrogation of why there's a higher rate of Black crime in this country. You know, it's the, you know, the black on white violence debate all over again, just with an Asian lens. And so
that's kind of disturbing, but yeah, I'm not surprised.
Yes. I mean, there are Asian social media accounts that just put up footage of Black people assaulting Asian people and say, this is what the media won't show you. It's very like 1994, you know, cable news sort of.
Yeah, it feels very 1994 post Rodney King civil unrest to me. You know, that they try to, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, we can have that conversation. That's where this term roof Korean comes from, right?
Yes. Oh, I actually had that in my notes. I'm glad you mentioned that. Like and similarly in white extremist circles, especially online in terms of social media and memes, rooftop Korean from the LA riots, the images of folks standing on their roof, business roofs with shotguns and rifles and handguns, defending against sort of this faceless imagined horde of Black and brown people. I mean, it's a horrible thing that happened. I wrote an article about why rooftop Koreans have become such a powerful meme for Second Amendment sort of Proud Boy types. And
it's weird all these decades later, this all of a sudden has become a thing. And I've had kids ask me like, what is the root of that? And I'm like, 1992, like when I was in college, like it's weird.
And honestly, it feels a lot like, let's boil it down. Look at this model minority doing what nobody else had the guts to do, which is shoot guns at Black and brown people who are trying to take their stuff. Yeah, it's a tokenizing process. Now, I have family members who lived through that experience, for real. And it's not a cool thing that they want to make like fascist memes about. It was like a horribly traumatic experience and a wake-up call. And you know, I think certainly it left some Asian people with a bitter taste in their mouths about their fellow minority communities and feeling victimized by that. I think you can't really help it when
of course you can't.
The way it does.
But, I also think, can I just interject this right here? I think the thing that still sticks with me to this day, I mean, I was like, 22 or something when this happened. But Daryl Gates, our then police chief, who was an incredibly racist individual, like horrifyingly racist, was at a fundraiser ignoring what happened. And his instruction had gone out to the LAPD to just not intervene. So really, this is a racist white dude basically telling two different minority groups that I don't give a shit what you do to each other, burn down your businesses, go after each other, whatever. It's not my problem. It's not, as long as you don't come into the white wealthy neighborhoods, it's fine. I mean, that's sort of the messaging that he was putting out. And I know that, at the time, several LAPD officers were like, why can't we go? People need help. This is insane. Why is he preventing us? Why are we in this parking lot for hours and hours just standing here? I mean, there were so many messed up things from that happened. And I think to come forward 25 years later and decide that this is a good thing to create a meme over is just really off-putting on so many levels.
It's super, super off-putting, but I'm not at all surprised, right? I mean, I think so much of modern right-wing expression is sort of couched in irony and layers of sort of sarcastic support. When I think about how the Proud Boys sort of appropriated the Swahili term for freedom as their like rallying cry.
Yeah, uhuru, right?
It's just, you see the jokes kind of writing themselves for that community. And I think it's the same thing. Now, what I think the real harm is when this rhetoric, which is so infused with this regressive idolization of an America that once was, and sort of subliminal and often explicit ideas about white supremacy,
yeah.
And how there is a hierarchy in America, and why Asians being closer to that white hegemony is actually a good thing. I think all those feelings have led to pushing actual Asian people into extremist circles. I mean,
okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, we know the phenomenon of groups like Latinos for Trump or whatever.
Right.
We know about how Cuban conservatism has led to a lot of political division and support for right-wing candidates from brown people in places like Florida. We know about that. But I think also now what we're seeing is a rising movement of Asian reactionary thought. And that I think is what pushes a guy like Tony Moon out onto the streets, quote unquote, the rooftop Korean, who's out and about in Los Angeles, going to rallies, trying to weaponize water bottles to smack people over the head with, and running with a group who claim to be pulling security and want to be leaders on the front lines. I mean, in some ways, to the Asian stereotype, that's so radical. Like,
it's
incredibly
radical, right?
That. Yeah, we are not supposed to be doing that. But it's, and I guess the counterpoint.
And you're right; it is incredibly reactionary. It
is, because to me, I almost think of what I heard from some of my elder family members who had immigrated to America, talking about, oh, America is the best, America is like, you want to move into a nice white rich neighborhood, you want to make your money, like you want to put your head down. It's a lot of those attitudes I think have evolved, and it's evolved with that bitterness that I was talking about a lack of visible human representation, and really the Asian community not being seen as a monolith. And so I think that's very inspiring to folks who want to join militias and front lines and really cause a splash.
So they're pushing back against that stereotype of like, no, we're not all the same. Like, you think just because I'm Asian, I think this. Yeah, I totally see that. Yeah. Yeah.
And, there's a lot of psychoanalysis around why would someone want to be a token member of a community? Hey, maybe that comes into it too. But I really think that it is an evolution of conservative thought that existed in Asian, especially East Asian communities, and that's my experience being Korean, evolving into something new, just like it has for other parts of American society. 25 years ago, we couldn't have imagined the insurrection. When it happened, for me, it was the most obvious thing that could happen.
Exactly. It was like, yes, of course that happened. Anybody that had been paying attention to these groups were like, that happened.
So this is a good point about how the movement of the Overton window, or the normalization of certain forms of politics, how that movement toward the right affects all people. Victims, yes, to go back to the start of our conversation, victims, absolutely, but also inspiring new members of extremist groups. And if I'm going to be fair, I would also say that there's a lot of energy among young Asian people to become anarchists, to become a part of Antifa sort of circles, to serve as the extremist front line in defense of things that
they see as fascist.
And in protection of things that they feel is important. So, not to both sides this, but to say that this energy and context is leading people into new territory, I believe is actually really, really true.
I think it's definitely true. I think back, there's a LA Proud Boy who is Asian. I believe he's from Vietnam, but I'm not 100% sure. But, I had this conversation with him one day. This was about 3-4 years ago, actually. And I've never been able to let go of it because it was really a stunning conversation for me, what he said. He was being frank. And he told me that when he moved to this country, when his parents moved to this country, not him, he was not here yet. When his parents moved to this country, they were sponsored by Holocaust survivors. Mm-hmm. And so I thought to myself, and I said to him quite frankly, I said, so then how can you do what you do now? I really want you to explain this to me. And then he said, well, Nazis don't exist anymore. And I'm like, Nazis don't exist anymore, but they do. And he's like, no, they don't. Nazis died out in 1943. And I'm like, that's a ridiculous way to reframe this conversation. You're basically trying to say if you're not associated directly with World War II Germany, that ideology has no place. And I'm like, that's ridiculous. That's absurd. Of course it does. And then I went to his Facebook profile page. And do you recall when Bernie Sanders did that rally? And I believe it was Arizona, and a group of guys threw a swastika over the side of the railing in the middle of the speech. So he had a photo of that on his Facebook page with a giant circle around it. And then in the conversation was a bunch of PYOB. I knew it was you guys, hearts, like, so the whole 9 yards. So that's stunning to me, right? You came to this country because of Holocaust survivors, but yet here you are siding with folks that would see Jewish people not exist, more or less.
Yeah.
How do you square that circle? It's a wild thing because it is deeply reactionary. And I think it's rooted in, I really do think, and Eddie, and I'd like to know your thoughts on this too. I think a lot of it's deeply rooted in anti-communism, right? Whether that's real or not doesn't matter. The American perception of what communism is, right?
Yeah.
Reactionary to that.
Yeah. The anti-communism movement, if you will, maybe just rhetoric, and the anti sort of communist party of China sort of thing is really fascinating because for 100 years in America, it's just been this catch-all boogeyman that if you let too many immigrants in, you're communist. If you
workers' rights,
want to increase Medicaid, it's communist. Right. I even wrote for Vice recently about some online agitators who are trying to push MAGA communism, which is, these are theory nerds. These are like Marxist theory nerds, and they think we're going to sell MAGA communism to the MAGA crowd, and
you're not.
Going to accelerate political. So. This is to say communism isn't often about communist policy or even communist ideology or theory. What it means instead is it is the antithesis of the thing that affirms America's greatness and a certain kind of America.
Boom. That is
capitalist, hierarchical America, where, to me, this America that people dream of, that extremists dream of, equality isn't the goal. Individuality is.
Right.
And that's what shapes these super incoherent views on the CCP and communism, because if you go to Shenzhen, you can be a money-loving, living it up capitalist and have a great time in China, but nobody wants to think about that. They are on Chan boards and on Telegram and stuff. They just talk about this omnipotent evil. That,
it doesn't make sense. At this point, China has state-sponsored capitalism is how I refer to it, but it is definitely not a command economy anymore. So the idea that it is kind of absurd to me. On that note, I actually want to play a couple of videos so people understand what we're talking about. I know you've seen this. Let me explain it before I play some of this. But there has been a prevalent movement at every single Trump rally I've been at every single Proud Boy rally I've been at, that is anti-CCP. There is always a group there that have their anti-CCP signs. And there is always, and I swear to God, without fail, a car that drives around the rally with bullhorns coming out of it that constantly says anti-CCP repeatedly over and over again, dialogue that they project. So this is definitely a thing. I interviewed Andy Campbell, who is the author of We Are Proud Boys. He's the editor at Huffington Post. One of the things that he told me that I thought was super fascinating is he had researched where all of the GoFundMe donations were coming in for Proud Boys for their legal defense, and a vast majority of it was coming from Chinese immigrants, which I thought was shocking.
Yes.
But
that's
here we are.
Something that shocked me as well. Yeah. And hey, what better evidence of a legitimate Asian conservatism / reactionary movement, right?
Than that,
to take the enemy of my enemy is my friend to that degree.
Extreme.
You can only sort of distill it into one thing. You believe that America that you want is under attack from forces, and that any means are necessary to repel that quote unquote attack. right?
They think Biden and any sort of Democratic Party infrastructure is being infiltrated by the CCP. They actually, in fact, let's play this video. I have 2 videos. We can play them both, but I just so people can get an idea of what we're talking about if they haven't seen this before.
Good afternoon, America. This is Prince and
this is Evelyn.
And we're from the new federal state of China. We're outside here at America Fest 2022 at Phoenix Convention Center. Today, more than 100 supporters from all around the world of New FSC has shown up here to support our cause. And we're so honored to be invited by MFAS and by TPUSA to have 2 main stage speeches as well as 2 booths, 126 and 127 in the exhibition area. So we're the people of New Federal State of China, and our mission is to take down the evil Chinese Communist Party.
Thank you, Prince. Today we have met a lot of freedom-loving Americans and people from other countries to celebrate this huge event. And the people stay our booth and know about our mission, and most of all of them were amazed that what we are doing right now. They know that we're risking our life to take down the Chinese Communist Party and to stop the infiltration of America from by the Chinese government.
Take down the CCP! 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 Take down the CCP!
So, New Federal State of China is this thing that's out there now. I'm not sure who's funding them. I'm curious to know if anyone's doing work into trying to like peel the layers back on that onion. But it's this thing all of a sudden that is I think the natural outcome of this anti-CCP movement that we've seen kind of escalating for the last few years.
First of all, I just want to make a joke that's the weirdest Shenyun promotion I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Jokes aside, that's bizarre. That was a new one, the New Federal State of China. And what's bizarre about it, right, is that there are autonomous movements in China to increase democratic rights, to increase certain forms of representation, to free places like Xinjiang and Tibet. And this is not that. This is not even, hey, the CCP is failing to take care of the rural poor and our nationalist policies on that front have regressed.
Right.
It's not that. It's take down the CCP.
Yeah.
And
I think it's organically I think it's an organically 100% American. I do not think that this is a movement started in China that's come here to the United States. I think it's being funded by some right-wing extremists of some sort. But it's just wild that this is like it's increasing in a way, and it's you're right, it's incredibly reactionary, but it's also like, what is the end game of this?
And it swirls some competing facts, right? For instance, there are some big time, as you already know, protests in China against the CCP's policies regarding COVID. Right. And there are people right now, Chinese young people, who are coming out in support of those protests and saying, hey, the Chinese government needs to do things differently. But that is swirling with and adding to this other kind of communist discontent, which is very little to do with living conditions in China and very much to do, I think, with American hegemony.
I agree.
Down the
I agree.
CCP.
I
Why?
agree. Because it's the biggest threat to the American empire, right? At this point, China is the biggest threat economically, power-wise.
Sure.
Of course, yeah, I mean.
Sure. I mean, but you know, what happens to the debt we owe China if the CCP goes? I mean, I'm starting to think of things in a more
That's a good
rational
question. I think the Chinese government probably holds more treasury bonds from the United States than anybody. So that is a valid question, honestly.
So yeah, I mean, it's fascinating, and this is the same thing that, you know, down in Orange County, why would Congresswoman Michelle Steele red bait her Asian opponent as being a part of the communist machine? Have you no shame? And the answer these days is no. And honestly, the capacity for shame changes when the Overton window moves, when things become normalized and stuff like TPUSA conferences and things become breeding grounds for all kinds of weird ideologies, but especially grifts. And I don't want to dismiss NFSC without doing research as being a grift, but it smells of a grift, right? Because it's so opaque, its goals are so not transparent, and it's who are these people? What is their stake in it? And I've written a lot about the political grift and how that's almost the new political economy, right? It is these sort of various people, MAGA communist, acolytes, people who are just dirtbag sort of right wingers in RVs going from rally to rally trying to make a buck on live streams, to people like, at the very top, folks like Tucker Carlson who have made institutional money off of this type of rhetoric. And so, here I am just shaking my head, somewhat annoyed and shocked, but not at all surprised.
It's wild.
Yeah,
it's absolutely wild.
There is so much opportunity, not just politically, but economically, for people to make a living off of this rhetoric. And I think the fact that, I think there's actual research that shows the media literacy of folks who identify as conservative or right-wing, and the fact that, there's very little factual basis for a lot of these grievances. And our American system, our culture, our society, our education system is not built to fix this overnight. And, when people talk about how do we stop Asian hate crimes, I wrote a story called The Lingering Wounds of Anti-Asian Hate for Mel Magazine. And I spoke to two great people here in the Bay, Cynthia Choi, the head of Chinese for Affirmative Action, which is a progressive nonprofit, and Eddie Zhang, who is a community organizer and an advocate for underprivileged folks. He works a lot in the East Bay in Oakland. And both of them were saying, listen, we can't prosecute our way out of this. We are reaping the sins of American culture and society and political habit. And what that means is not only is an angry extremist right going to look for more targets, right? But they're also going to be recruiting the most discontented people who are a part of the group, Asians. You can either be a chink or some other slur and you're a commie, or you can be on the right side and you're a wholehearted American and you believe in democracy and all these sort of, stereotypes. And I think this will only continue to get more complicated because, again, I can't stress this enough. Asian American is not a monolith. It means...
No, it's definitely not. It's definitely not. I mean, I think of all the times I've seen at Trump rallies, Asian American individuals literally wearing these outfits that are like head to toe photos of Trump printed on fabric with American flags and like really extreme, right? And you're just like, wow. It's wild. But it's, again, all of this is reactionary. And I do think it's related to the economic things that underlie most of right-wing movements.
Right. And by the way, when progressive Asians advocate for things like critical race theory being legitimized and taught, it's because of experiences that many of us have had with family members, friends, older folks who have these very regressive takes, because especially if they were a part of the cohort like my parents were in the 1970s of coming through in a big immigration wave, leaving often war-torn nations. Korea was a mess, basically under a fascist dictatorship after the war. And America really does seem like heaven in a sense. And I think, what is American hegemony? American hegemony is not merely its economic and militaristic strength or imperialistic might. It is also the mythology around America.
Huge, yes, the myth is huge.
And so to me, this is, we are seeing all kinds of people protect that myth, put their bodies on the line to maintain that myth, to trespass onto the Capitol in defense of that myth. And naturally, folks who came here in search of a better life, whether it's from Cuba, whether it's from Korea, whether it's from Vietnam, are going to think that way. And I don't mean to say that Asian extremism is becoming the next big thing. I actually think we're still underrepresented in that sort of political
100%. Yeah, I agree
very
with
much
you.
So. Yeah. But this is the start, right?
It's and this is there's always a start.
Yeah, and this is perhaps the most American thing of all, is this, what does assimilation look like? Oh, this is kind of what assimilation looks like.
This is what assimilation looks like. You know what's really fascinating to me, Eddie, is that a lot of the countries where these individuals, their families come from, whether they're first generation or second generation, whatnot, you know, like Japan has traditionally been a very ultra-nationalist government, right? I don't know if a lot of Americans know that. So I would consider that far right. They're ultra nationalists. You know, Chinese government, communism, even with the state-sponsored capitalism, is one-party rule. It's a bit authoritarian. So there are Malaysia, obviously. I mean, we can go down the list and see that there is a lot of, like Vietnam, the history there. There is a lot of authoritarian regimes. The Philippines, like, you know, that is kind of been predominantly the forms of government, whether they're right or left, they've taken some form of authoritarianism. So I wonder, like, so then you come to the United States and you're like, I want freedom. I believe in this myth of civil liberty and, you know, unbounded freedom, and that's what's attractive to me. And in order to get that thing, that myth that I believe exists and that I want, I'm willing to, like, destroy the democracy to get it. Like, I mean, there's sort of a weird irony to that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and you know, I just want to point out, often when you speak to folks who talk about these ideas, they don't see the contradictions, right?
No,
like
they
how,
don't.
for instance, like all the fervor over voter and election fraud.
Yeah.
You know, it's under the guise of saving democracy when you're actually trying to dismantle the elements of that process that make it democratic, like, you know, not forcing people to stand in a line all day. Like, so it's just.
Or preventing Biden from becoming the president. I mean, like, I mean, that's the most authoritarian thing you could do, right? So it's wild. It's kind of.
And I've been to enough protests to know that really what I think we're seeing here is a lot of isolated people trying to find community, trying to find coherent meaning in lives that lack that. You know, I've struggled with depression. I've looked at my life and been like, why do I feel isolated? Why do I feel like we don't have rituals and social community and things that are easily accessible in that form? That's what has made me interested in politics and political circles and organizing. And unfortunately, I think it's just on a spectrum. And it's not strange to me at all that folks like Asian Proud Boys and things like that they relish in being different, in being not who they're supposed to be.
Not, and I think, as what the world perceives them to be,
Right, and I think that's a slightly different kind of discontent than our white peers who are in those same exact spaces, right? We know a lot about...
by design it's gonna be, right? Because that is what white supremacy does to people, right? On the good and the bad side, you know what I mean? It just defines both of those things.
And so when you have Proud Boys like Enrique Tarrio saying, we're not racist, we accept people from every... I know that they accept people from everywhere. I mean, you know, we've seen enough Proud Boys of color.
But that doesn't mean they're not racist.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. It means that any means to an end is necessary. And sometimes that's that. But, you know, you talk to you read from the most extreme perspectives in extremist circles, and they're like, oh, everyone's just a pawn on the way to something else. You know, why does the far right have a snitching problem, have a rat problem? I wrote about that. And it's because these are often opportunists. Yeah. And that is a huge differentiation between, you know, both sides, like, oh, the left Antifa. It's simply not the same.
It's not even remotely, the
same money, the same energy. It simply is not. So, yeah.
Anti-fascists are not grifters at all, because most of the time they don't even want to be recognized or named. You know what I mean? They sort of want to work with their autonomy to have their goal, which is to defeat fascism. So yeah, they're very much different. You know, and I've had those conversations. I'm having another one of them that I spoke to in Beverly Hills was basically saying to me, listen, I know that racists exist. I know there are racists in the Trump organization. I know that Trump's a racist. He's like, I don't care. He's like, because you know why I don't care? He's like, there's also racism on the left. There are people in the Biden administration that are racist, which is all true, right? I don't disacknowledge that. So his thing was like, I'm going to stand with the people that I politically agree with and not care about that aspect, because that aspect's going to be there no matter what.
Right.
That's a valid point.
Yeah, it's a valid point. And if you're seeking community, not ideological clarity, not a mission necessarily politically, other than take down this enemy. And that enemy could be a drag story time at a library.
Right.
It could be randomly, like I reported on randomly a protest at the Chinese embassy. Like,
that's wild, yeah.
That's an American representative.
Yeah.
It's not, what are you protesting? Like, so,
I don't know if they know.
So it's about vibes. So much of this is about vibes. It's about vibing in the right way and finding a sense of comfort.
Finding acceptance. Yeah, I think that's true. 100% true.
And that is not to downplay the tactical violence. Things like Governor Gretchen Whitmer trying to kidnap Whitmer. There are serious, dangerous people. There are murderers and killers and rapists who are extremists. But the vast majority, especially in the post-Trump era or the post-2016 era, are not quite that. And I think that's why, I was browsing Andrew Callahan's new the Channel 5 HBO documentary, This Place Rules, in which he just went around the country interviewing Q and MAGA and all of that. None of those people make sense.
No,
none of those people make sense.
They don't.
That's why we cringe and chuckle and why we watch that documentary on HBO is because
I haven't seen it yet. I'll have to check it out.
But there are serious harms, right? Like in one clip we see like a 9 or 10-year-old child just repeating talking points. He's homeschooled and he's isolated because none of his peers want to hear about how Joe Biden is a reptile. Oh my God. And so we see, instead of what I was hoping as someone in my 20s thinking, oh, Gen Z is going to change the world. It's never like that because we're all products of our upbringing and the society that we grow up in.
That's why change is slow.
That's why change is slow. Yeah. And unfortunately, that's going to be the trailing effects of this. Like, I'm privileged enough to not really be fearful of getting attacked by a white or Asian person who disagrees with me politically. What I am afraid of is the descendant of that thought, right? Whether that's a literal child or just their effect on their community, their families, the people around them.
That kid has no idea that that's false information. That's really tragic. It's tragic, really.
And even people who disagree are often put into this stalemate where they can't really do anything because they're worried about just further, pushing a person away and disenfranchising them. I mean, it's such a complicated place to be in society.
It's psychologically very complicated,
Yeah, and I think that's why scholars are really looking at what needs to change structurally in the way that we're educated, in the way that we communicate with one another, in the way that we break out of echo chambers, especially online. I think that's where a lot of the sort of energy is being put into, and rightfully so, because I don't think we can just counter protest and police our way out of this, unfortunately. Right. And I think both of those things do play a role, but especially I'm heartened to hear that more people are reporting hate crimes or hate incidents against them, and that's a good thing. People need to be aware of this rather than it happening and just going home and trying to forget about it. So, it's going to be a long road ahead.
It's going to be a long road ahead. Before we move on to the next topic, which is I want to look at some of the writing you've done with abortion and white supremacy. You're familiar with sovereign citizen
very much so.
Ideology.
There's no sense of what belongs to who, and to me that makes for a lot of chaos. It makes for a lot of theft, and it paves the way for tremendous violence. And we've seen that in every communist revolution that we've observed in history. There's always tremendous violence. There's genocide, often based on class. What they do is they foment a lot of hatred for anyone who happens to be successful. So it's built on greed and avarice, really. So, and I'm not saying there isn't greed and avarice in capitalism, because there certainly is. But at the very least in capitalism, transactions they're supposed to be voluntary. So we effectively believe that within the boundaries that are established by God, which is that we may not initiate force against the life, liberty, or property of anyone else. Within those boundaries, we should be allowed to do as we please as individuals. So with our own lives, with our own liberty, with our own property.
This seemed really counterintuitive to me at the time that anybody that came from the Asian culture would kind of jive with these beliefs. But a lot of it was, again, driven by anti-communist rhetoric. What are your thoughts on that? This is probably not a very common thing to see, I'm guessing.
No, it's not something that I've come across a lot. In fact, if within the topic of sovereign citizen movements, I think it's Black Americans that are maybe highly represented.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah. In fact, I wrote about a Portland family that was evading eviction, and they were doing so through increasing sort of sovereign citizen rhetoric, and had anti-fascists sort of occupying space and keeping police out of this eviction. Very weird swirl of things, but
that's
yeah. I mean, I think sovereign citizen movements are the most pure individualistic sort of reactionary, anti-authoritarian tactic, and it is strange to hear about Asian folks going down that path, only because that implies a deep interest in American law and how to leverage it, almost always incorrectly, but and so I'm trying to think who would be attracted to that. Certainly, carving out your own space, your own jurisdiction is maybe the American dream, the most American dream of all. But it almost reminds me of how folks are trying to create autonomous zones in Seattle and things like that, more than necessarily.
Yeah, I guess it's the right-wing militia response on the other side to. Yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah, and so but again, as soon as you start going down, if you declare yourself a sovereign citizen or you're interested, all of a sudden, boom, automatically you're within a community, a very niche community. Right. And I think there is power and agency that comes from that decision. Because legally and financially, I don't think it's worth the trouble for most people to leverage the sovereign citizen thing. It's very complicated.
To me, it doesn't make sense because, especially if you're somebody that believes, if you're super right-wing, it makes sense to me. But if you're somebody that believes in leftist ideals such as the common good, it doesn't make sense. The reason you pay taxes is because that money goes into funding the fire department, paved roads, libraries, things of that nature. And these guys don't think they should have to pay any taxes to the government, or there's no, common public goods.
Yeah, well, and I will say, Tina, I think maybe one of the counterpoints is that sometimes there is kind of a land back or reparations take to sovereign citizen movements.
I have not seen that. Interesting.
Yeah, I think within the Black sovereign citizen movement, that is often the case. It is a wrestling back of control and agency. And I think it's partly inspired by, perhaps the oldest autonomous movement in terms of Native American reservation lands and things like that, although the history around that is very tragic, of course. I think there is at least this idea that it's almost
interesting.
To me,
that makes more sense to me than this Ruby Ridge kind of mentality, but okay.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
With the Bundys, that's also a similar thing, right? Hey, these are my cattle. They're on BLM lands, but that's mine. You can't mess with it type of attitude.
Right.
It does kind of, yeah, to me, it is a vision of like old America, like 1700s, like 1800s type of America. It's that sort of vision. And, it's funny because I've heard that strategy applied to so many political niches, including like incels who want to create like a new territory just for other incels where women can be invited, but,
and be slaves, agree to be raped.
Yeah. Right. And so it's it's like this little template that you can place on top of a lot of political ideologies where someone gets to the breaking point and they're like, you know what, screw it. I'm just not going to participate in American infrastructure anymore. It's like going off the grid, except you refuse to pay taxes and then get audited by the IRS in a very painful, years-long process.
Exactly. Not my idea of a good time. So on that note, I want to turn towards white supremacists and their obsession with abortion and fertility rates, right? So this is definitely a thing. It sort of ties back into the idea of white replacement theory, right? The reason that a lot of the neo-Nazis out there are against abortion is because they don't think white women are having enough white children, and they want to encourage that, right? They think white women need to have like 20 times more babies than they already are having. So you wrote two pieces that I thought were both very good. The first one I want to put up is white supremacists like the Buffalo shooter are obsessed with fertility. This is an angle I don't think a lot of folks have considered, because this goes beyond just the abortion. This is the actual fertility, right? So the Buffalo shooter talked up birth rates and demographic shifts as key indicators of the replacement of whites in America. It's an old trope wielded by right-wing America since the turn of the 20th century, and it's become a powerful meme to justify violence today. If there's one thing I want you to get from these writings, it's that white birth rates must change. That's from his manifesto.
Yeah.
So reads the first line of the Buffalo shooter's rambling 180-page message to the world. Much of it was plagiarized from previous mass shooter manifestos, and though many portions of the document, through many of the portions of the document, 18-year-old Peyton Gendron obsesses over women and their fertility, regurgitating right-wing talking points about the loss of white supremacy as other races fill in America. So that was the first piece. I want to talk about that first, and then we'll turn to the other one on abortion. It's a common theme. Yeah. We've seen it. They're convinced that, part of the problem I have with their rhetoric is in their mind's eye, all white women agree with them, right?
Yes.
We all, none of us are dating people outside of the white race, which is insane. That's right. and we all want to just have white babies. And the reason we're not doing that is because we're not staying at home. We're out working instead or whatnot. So what are some of the thoughts you had when you were writing this?
To me, it's so interesting how so much of white discontent in this country is evidenced as boiling down to the perception of scarcity. They are losing something. And that's what's so powerful about the hegemony, right? Like it's a big fancy word used by leftists and all that. But what it really talks about is why is there dominance of a culture and of a group? And what mythologies maintain that? And so this fear that there's loss of speech rights, there's loss of protection from police, there's loss of fertility and white children. It all comes from, I think, a long-standing insecurity. And we saw that, again, we saw that after Reconstruction. We saw that after Jim Crow laws fell. And most recently, it became a fight when schools were forced to be desegregated. And the Christian right saw what was happening, and they were like, oh, like, no. Like, we have to put our foot in somehow. And which is why the anti-abortion debate first got started in the 60s. I mean, Christians were not all that upset about abortion till that point.
No, they weren't at all. And in fact, Catholic Church actually supported abortion. If there's a great documentary on this called Reversing Roe, if anyone has an interest in that. You're right. It was not the thing that it is today.
Right. And so we see an example of how civil rights advancement led to a need to desegregate schools, which led to perceived scarcity of white spaces, white education, all of that. And so, to create abortion as a wedge issue makes a lot of sense. And to tie it back to fertility, it makes a lot of sense because it's not the thing, it's a thing that is a part of the argument.
Right.
It's never just about fertility. It's never just about immigration. It's never just about the harms of minority representation. It's the same thing when men seem to be upset that a woman was going to be a ref in the NFL. Remember that argument years ago when the first female referee in the NFL, and some people made it out to be a decline in the sport or the loss of jobs for men, if that was ever the issue in the NFL. It's crazy. Yeah. So, scarcity. And I've been trying to think about how scarcity affects all of the political discourse and turmoil in this country. But yeah, I mean, the obsession with
it's false scarcity often.
False scarcity, exactly. I think declining birth rates are a concern insofar as that many modern Western democracies seem to be struggling in terms of the future of that. For me personally, I think it's more about young people facing huge
they can't afford to have kids.
In terms of wealth and the lack of generational wealth and all of that. But, you know, when it feels like something is going wrong, a lot of people will take a big idea and just repeat it. You know, things become memes. And I think the loss of the white race because of declining birth rates is one of those memes that is just so common, so spammed across so many different groups, incel groups, white, sort of white hate groups, various even multiracial extremist groups like the Proud Boys still often buy into this type of thing, and they blame all forms of societal change for that happening. Is it the queerification of America that's doing this? Is it critical race theory and people wanting to marry outside their race? Like, that doesn't even make sense. What are the connections really? But you know, when you feel like you're under attack, you're going to push back somehow. And I think this is another way, you know, and that's why I say when someone like that young man goes on that mass killing and writes white birth rates must change in his manifesto, I mean, does that really explain what pushed him to that point? No, it doesn't. What it explains is that they were subsumed in an online culture, most likely, that was memeing the hell out of that point. And there's, you know, a lot of scholarship around radicalization and rabbit holes and red pilling, but, you know, all those points still stand. And I think, what's going to be the next thing, Tina? What do you think? I mean, I'm trying to think. Will we circle back to the border issue? Will we?
That's never going to go away. You know, so it's interesting to me because I think what's happening, and I think you're hitting on this when you're talking about, you know, the Proud Boys, even they're a multicultural organization. What they're complaining about, they're not going to say it's the decline of white civilization. They're saying it's the decline of Western civilization, right? That's a word play as far as I'm concerned, because the implication of that is white civilization, right? So when we say Western civilization, we mean white, because we're talking about European nations that went and conquered other places, right, in search of empire. I also think it's really disturbing that this idea that, okay, so, you know, we've now decoded the human genome. We all know that race is biologically vacuous. It's not really a thing. So the things that define race at this point are cultural. Like, what are the cultural norms? And I don't think that those fairly or adequately describe race either, in the sense, because if you are from Sweden, per se, Sweden is very multicultural. It's not just white folks. The cultural norms there in Sweden transcend race, right? It's about being Swedish. Like, we celebrate, you know, Midsummer, because Midsummer is a Swedish cultural celebration, right? It's got nothing to do with race. Whereas you go to other parts of the globe. Now, is it the case if you've been in a very hegemonic society that everybody in that society is the same race and they all celebrate that culture together? Yes, that's possible too. But I think that as you know, people intermarry, for example, that starts to go away as well. It's not just the genetic alleles that sort of spread out, right? So, and I do think that circles back to scarcity. I agree with you. I think that's exactly, it's perceived panic over a loss. And I do think that perceived panic would be far less if there was less income inequality. I think the big driver of all of this truly is income inequality.
Yeah, and I can't help but make parallels again to incels. You know, there was a study that I wrote about that correlated incel speech and expression online with widening income, inequality gaps on the ground, perceived loss of community spaces, so on and so forth. So, I mean, look at Korea, again, South Korea, sometimes a dream in the minds of some extremists as a nation that seems to have its stuff together, but actually South Korea very much does not, you know, because of horrible, crushing wealth inequality, especially for younger generations. I don't think it's a coincidence that we're seeing a huge anti-feminist movement, a big incel movement, a lot of sort of desperation around, I don't have any prospects professionally and I don't have them sexually either because of that. Although a lot of that, again, is false scarcity. And sometimes very real scarcity in terms of, you know, if people are like depressed and not working, well, they're not going to go out as much either. But
yeah, they're not going to go out as much. And also the way that they come across to women, it can be really problematic, and they don't want to sort of address that. Maybe these guys, if they stopped for a second and thought like, oh, being really mean and abusive towards a woman isn't going to get me laid. They don't seem to realize that. They worship guys like, Andrew Tate, who's been in the news, who are telling them, yes, manipulate young women, hit them, rape them. It's fine. That's how you get what you want from them. Like, no, that's not. That is absolutely not the case. But that's the messaging that they're hearing.
Right. And the even more nuanced messaging is, hey, even if you don't want to do those things, progressive culture has gone too far. We need to bring back common sense and hierarchy to the way that people relate to one another. So that's the strange thing, is that so much of what we've been talking about on this podcast is a distinctly American expression of political turmoil. However, aspects of that at the core, at the foundation, are happening all across the world in Western-style democracies. And it's really creating a lot of the same patterns in terms of male discontent in the hegemonic demographic, and how the internet thing leads those folks into very, very defined niche rabbit holes, where they can come to a certain kind of potentially violent conclusion about what needs to change in the world. And that's why, January 6th is such an American thing, and yet it's not. It's not. I think that's why so much of what I would like to see, even in terms of the media coverage around this, is looking at, well, what patterns are we reliving right now? What did happen after Reconstruction? What did happen after minority groups gained agency in big ways? What happened after minority groups got visibility in big ways? Like, how did
this isn't our first time at the rodeo, right? We've been through these cycles.
Even in World War II, how did Japanese internment
100%.
affect hate crimes and demonization of people who were not interned and other Asians? I mean, it's just...
there was, after World War II in this country, the United States of America, I don't know, a lot of folks realize this, we had very robust right-wing extremist movements happening, whether it was the German Bund, whether it was the Christian Front, which was very, very much right-wing militia group. So, I mean, we've sort of lived through this. I don't think it's necessarily worse now than it was then. It feels worse now because we're living through it, right?
Yeah.
But there's definitely been cycles of this in the United States.
Yeah, and to tie it all back, I do think what is kind of unique about our conversation today is, I think because of the lack of political visibility for many Asian American communities and Asian immigrant communities so far, I think it is almost kind of a canary in the coal mine type of a metaphor at play here, because I think what we see in terms of Asian extremism, Asian reactionary thought, a new Asian conservatism movement, including in places that are quote unquote liberal heavens like San Francisco. I think that is demonstrating what American society and what culture and American politics today, what kind of emotions and tactics that they're inspiring, right? And this is why I'm also very critical of the Democratic Party, because they've missed opportunities to really put a foot down in the ground and say, we're going to sort of re-steer the direction of the narrative, of the rhetoric. But instead, we're just caught in this sort of two-party Pong game, while folks who are disenfranchised by both mainstream parties are finding new ways to express and new ways to be violent, both physically and rhetorically and emotionally. So, I mean, obviously a lot of lack of leadership from the Republican Party when it comes to these sort of fascist and fascist-light ideas and figures, but certainly not the kind of pushback that we, many of us wanted from the Democratic Party.
I agree.
You may know this, but the Dems funded many extremist candidates across the country in an attempt to destabilize Republican.
Pied Piper, They really believe that.
And hey, if someone told me that works, then okay, I would nod along. But
it doesn't work, though.
What is the rhetorical harm of
they don't care?
And
there's that too.
Funding?
Yeah, there is rhetorical harm that comes from moving that Overton window. You're 100% correct on that. But they stupidly also believe that these people were unelectable because they can't read the room.
Yeah.
They don't see where we are.
Yeah. So, we see the trickle down of political decisions and the way that our political economy is taught, is consumed, and is sold. And we see now that it's like brought a community that once was not on the political fringe very much into the political fringe, right? And so, not to tokenize Asians as the canary in the coal mine, but from my perspective, it is kind of like that metaphor.
Indeed. We sort of touched on this. There was a second article, the anti-abortion movement was always about a race war. Yeah. I think this is true. So I want to throw that up really quickly. The debate about the rights of a pregnant person and an unborn fetus has raged for decades, but the origin of the American anti-abortion movement wasn't built in good faith. Instead, it relied on right-wing organizing around fears of white extinction, which continues to fuel the anti-choice rage that we see today. I agree with you on this. I think it drives a lot of, the religious right as well.
Yeah, and I think later on in the article, I mentioned, some of the words and actions of the biggest leaders in this conservative religious movement say it all. Jerry Falwell, very, very famous. He claimed later that opposing abortion inspired his religious career, but in reality, he didn't even deliver a sermon on the topic until more than 5 years after Roe versus Wade had passed, according to a historian. And his close friend and ally, Paul Weyrich, basically said the quiet part out loud when he said, quote, "What galvanized the Christian community was not abortion, school prayer, or the Equal Rights Amendment. What changed their minds was Jimmy Carter's intervention against Christian schools, trying to deny them tax-exempt status on the base of so-called de facto segregation," is what he said in an interview. So that's Paul Weyrich, sort of a big figure in the moral majority / sort of new Christian right campaign that started in the late 1970s. And that, along with the moral influence of Ronald Reagan,
huge.
Who is still celebrated as the father of the pro-life movement. I mean, this was really a ripe time for conservatives to stoke growing fears about rising sexual, social, economic liberation of women, and portraying abortion rights as a symptom of how America was going wrong. So you hear all the same things, the themes of change, of scarcity, of loss, of perceived loss, and how status quo America was supposed to be the ideal. Given that these were folks who were fighting against civil rights in various ways, I don't know how true we should, view that, but that's exactly how the escalation happened. You have top-down rhetoric that influences, even the KKK by 1985 was in on this thing that they had never, ever cared about before, ever. And they were putting up wanted signs for, asking for personal information of abortion providers and stuff like that. So you see immediately within 10 years, the escalation of rhetoric and potential for violence.
Indeed.
And that's why when I talk about things in good faith and in bad faith, I like to use that framing in some of my op-eds and writings, because I think conservatism is not inherently bad faith. I would be okay with the existence of an American conservative movement that was basing its rhetoric on evidence and scholarship and with good faith interaction and debate with the other side. But unfortunately, I think what we've seen right now is a regression of politics where everything is kind of a money-making opportunity and anything goes if you can attempt to get the final outcome that you want. And so something like this, like the new Christian right in the 1970s and 80s, working in bad faith to gin up tempers and panic about abortion and about the corrosion of American society at a time when America was becoming the most successful, most capitalist, most rich nation in the world. It's just a little bit bizarre, right? It doesn't make sense in the way that some of us want it to. But I think that's by design. I think the smoke and mirrors is always by design when it comes to this kind of extremism and this corner of conservatism, which has now become far more than a corner. It's become the landscape.
It's quickly definitely becoming the landscape. Eddie, I wanted to thank you so much for joining me today. A really informative conversation. And I also want to ask you what's the best place for people to find your work? I know Mail Magazine, but your Twitter, wherever else you think is a good place for them to look you up.
Thank you so much for having me, Tina. This was a wide-ranging and honestly, really thoughtful conversation, even for me to walk through as I'm writing an academic journal article on actually rising reactionary politics in Asian communities. So
awesome, perfect.
You can find more of my stuff. I'm still on Twitter, still hanging on.
I'm still hanging on too.
So Eddie Kim X, EDDIEKIMX. People can reach out to me also on my website, eddiekim.net. If you want to reach out or talk about some other things, please feel free to reach out to me. But if I were just to say one last thing before we go, I think look at strategy and tactics and how much they differ from the actual thing that's happening on the ground. And that's not disjointed because things are foolish and clumsy and not done right, although that's part of it. It's also by design in a way to sort of serve as a misdirection from what people are really wanting. And I think at the core is that inequality and loss of community, that there's been reams and reams and reams of material written about this. So I'm going to keep thinking about that after this talk, but thank you very much for having me on.
Absolutely. Thanks, Eddie.